Chapter 226, Part 1. Chen, Aunt May, are you at home? Immediately afterwards, Peter searched all over the room, but after he searched them all and found no trace of the two of them, he finally realized what they were doing. Aren't they all going out? He sat down on the sofa helplessly and glanced out of the corner of his eye. Suddenly, Peter seemed to have made some discoveries. Following his gaze, there was a note left by Chen Luo before he left on the coffee table in front of him. Picking it up and looking at it, Peter immediately understood the reason why the two of them were not at home. Did Chen and Aunt May go out on a date? Looking at the handwriting left on the note, Peter's face bloomed with a smile, and his eyes revealed joy. For the two of them to go out on a date, he definitely agreed with both hands. In order to take care of him, May had no time to manage her own relationship. Now she met Chen Luo by coincidence, 053. This may not be the case. A kind of fate. Moreover, after more than a month of getting along with Chen Luo, Peter has already regarded him as his father in his heart, so if the two of them can get together smoothly, he will have no objection at all. Reason. However, after he was happy, he suddenly reacted and turned to look at the empty kitchen, with a bitter look gradually showing on his face. Looks like I'll just have to make some oats tonight. When he thought about not being able to have Chen Luo's dinner tonight, Peter suddenly seemed a little listless. He stood up helplessly. Just when he was about to get up to get the oats, the next moment, the door opened again. Subconsciously, he looked back. When Peter saw the person clearly, his face was startled for a moment, and then he couldn't help but feel a hint of joy. A surge of strength came out of his body again. He happily walked to the door and spoke with a smile. Road, Chen, Aunt May, you are back? Oh, forget it. If May hadn't been worried that you wouldn't be able to eat when you come back tonight, I'm afraid we wouldn't have come back tonight. After hugging Peter for a while, Chen Luo handed over the groceries he just bought. Chen Luo shook his head and said helplessly, "What nonsense are you talking about?" After hearing this, May on the side blushed slightly, patted Chen Luo's arm gently, and said with some embarrassment, "Peter is still here. Please pay attention to me." Yes, I know." Chen Luo smiled and nodded without refuting. After returning home, Chen Luo didn't stop. He immediately walked into the kitchen with the vegetables he just bought and worked for a while. Then, he came to the dining table with the freshly prepared dishes. He couldn't wait to sit down at the dining table. Looking at the table full of food, Peter took a deep breath with a look on his face that was ready to move. Okay, let's get started. This was what he was waiting for. As soon as Chen Luo finished speaking, Peter could no longer hold back and entered the cooking mode. Eat slowly. Seeing him eating anxiously, May advised him from the side. After hearing May's words, Peter began to slow down. After eating and drinking, May walked into the kitchen and started washing the dishes, while Chen Luo took Peter to the sofa and sat down. As if he had thought of something, Chen Luo said casually, "How's it going, Peter? Did your class practice go well today? Were the auction items I prepared for you popular?" "Yeah." Peter cheered up and nodded repeatedly. "Chen, you were right. There are really many people competing for that notebook, and the final transaction price is beyond your imagination." "Oh, so confident." Chen Luo raised his eyebrows and looked at the other party with interest. "Let me guess. Looking at you like this, how many dollars did you sell this notebook for in the end?" No. Peter shook his head, with a trace of complacency on his face. "Guess again. As a friendly reminder, the final transaction price will be far higher than the number you mentioned. Far more than this number." Chen Luo suddenly became interested, thought about it, and then said, "Is it a few $1,000s? 5,000. At this time, Peter stopped being pretentious, stretched out 5 fingers, and said with a smile on his face, "So high." Chen Luo was also a little surprised when he heard this number. Although he was confident that the lot he selected for Peter would be popular with others, he still felt a little unbelievable that it could be sold at a price of $5,000. At the same time, Chen Luo suddenly became a little interested in Peter's class today. He really wants to know, who would spend such a high price of $5,000 to buy a laptop? Is it because there is too much money and nowhere to spend it? Or does the other person really love learning so much? Tell me, what is going on? Faced with Chen Luo's urging, Peter did not hesitate and spoke immediately, telling Chen Luo what happened in class today. After listening to the other party's narration, Chen Luo finally understood the whole story. "I see. So in the end, even though you sold this notebook for $5,000, you didn't get even a single penny, right?" After a pause, Chen Luo suddenly thought of something and looked at him with a funny face. "No, to be precise, you handed over $50. And just to buy an antique pair of glasses?" "Okay, Peter, tell me, what do you want that thing for?" "Chen, don't underestimate it." After hearing this, Peter was a little unconvinced. He immediately took out the auction item he got today from his backpack, put the antique glasses he bought in front of Chen Luo, and couldn't wait to start introducing to him. These are the glasses left by Captain Archibald Witwicky, the first explorer in human history to successfully reach the North Pole. And you don't know, this great explorer is the great-great-great-grandfather of our classmate. As a direct descendant of this great explorer, these things in Sam's house are definitely not fakes. In my opinion, this pair of glasses will definitely have a high collection value in the future. Listening to Peter enthusiastically begin to tell him the history of this pair of glasses, Chen Luo's originally smiling face suddenly froze. He blinked 2.1 times, looking at the pair of glasses in front of him. He seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes gradually began to change. Get weird. Wait. Finally, Chen Luo stretched out his hand to interrupt Peter's introduction, took the pair of glasses, paused, and asked Peter. Just now you said that your classmate sold you these glasses? His name is Sam, right? Sam Witwicky? Yes. What's wrong? Peter nodded and looked at him with some confusion. Nothing. Chen Luo took a deep breath and said nothing. He just walked to the window silently, opened the curtains, and began to scan around. After scanning around, Chen Luo finally confirmed his guess when he saw a familiar Camaro parked not far from their home. Lowering his head, Chen Luo looked at the pair of glasses in his hand and couldn't help but laugh. What a coincidence. Chapter 227, Part 1. The next morning, in front of Peter's house. Then I'm off. After eating breakfast as usual, Peter picked up his school bag and came to the door. Lianzi said goodbye to Chen Luo and the two. Be careful on the road. Mei waved her hands with a smile, wearing a nightgown, sitting on the dining table, eating her breakfast slowly and methodically. Since Chen Luo was born in this family, she doesn't have to get up early every day to prepare breakfast for Peter. She only wakes up from bed until Peter is about to leave every day, because after getting enough sleep and exercise, Mei's complexion will also be the same. It's better than it was a day ago. He looks several years younger and has a different kind of brilliance. I know. Peter responded, then seemed to think of something, blinked, and asked with a smile on his face. By the way, Aunt Mei, Chun, then what should I do tonight? Do you want to go home? If you have other arrangements, I can stay at Harry's house for one night. Hearing this, a blush suddenly appeared on Mei's face. She glanced at him without saying anything, and then turned her attention to Chen Luo, who was sitting on the sofa at the moment. The meaning was self-evident. Feeling the gaze, Chen Luo immediately understood. He stood up and came to the door, and slapped Peter on the back of the head. Snapped. Boy, how dare you even make a joke on your Uncle Chen now? Why don't you go to school quickly? While speaking, Chen Luo subconsciously glanced in a certain direction outside the door. When he saw the Camaro parked near his home, not far away for the night, his eyes flashed slightly. Then he pretended to be casual and said, By the way, Peter, just leave the pair of glasses you brought back at home for now. I'll keep them for you for a while. Huh. He glanced at Chen Luo with some doubts. Peter, who was confused, nodded without objecting. After all, he only bought the pair of glasses for collection and had no intention of taking them with him. It was naturally the most appropriate choice to leave them at home, and there would be no risk of losing them if they were left to Chen Luo for safekeeping. This was a big deal for Chen Luo. There is a deep level of trust. After waving goodbye to Peter, Chen Luo looked in the direction of the Camaro again out of the corner of his eye. Sure enough, after hearing what he just said, the other party had no intention of continuing to follow Peter, but stayed where he was, motionless. Seeing this, Chen Luo's mouth curved slightly. Without saying anything more, he turned around and closed the door. Recalling everything Peter told him last night, Chen Luo was already very confident that he could determine the other party's identity, but for further confirmation, he decided to continue to test the other party. After thinking about this, Chen Luo came to Mei and said, Mei, you eat slowly first. I may have an important trip later. Huh? Mei raised her head curiously, looked at Chen Luo and asked, What's the matter? It's nothing. Chen Luo explained with a smile. It's just that I think it might be inconvenient to have a car at home, so I plan to go to the second-hand market first to see if there are any second-hand cars for sale. I plan to buy one. Return. Second-hand car? Mei frowned slightly, asked Chen Luo to wait, and then quickly stood up and walked to the room. Not long after, when she came to the living room again, Mei held her wallet in her hand, took out a bank card and handed it to Chen Luo, saying, Take this. The family is not without money. A new car can still be purchased affordable. Looking at the bank card in the other person's hand, Chen Luo felt warm, tilted his head and looked at the other person, smiled and said, What? It seems you are planning to support me? Hearing this, a bright smile appeared on Mei's face. She nodded slightly and replied, If you think so, then that's okay. Shaking his head helplessly, Chen Luo did not take the bank card. He just smiled lightly, rubbed the other person's pretty face and explained, There is no need for this. I still have some savings. I can't say anything else. It's enough to buy a car. Really? She knew that Chen Luo would not lie to her in this regard, but Mei did not intend to take the bank card back. Instead, she directly stuffed it into Chen Luo's arms and said softly, Then you'd better accept this. With the money in it, you should be able to buy a better car. Although it was not stated explicitly, it was obvious that Mei still considered that Chen Luo might be embarrassed to drive a second-hand car when he went out in the future, so he wanted to let him use the money to buy a new car. How could Chen Luo, who had been with each other for so long, not understand the other party's thoughts? Although his purpose of going out this time was not really to buy a car, since it was May's kindness, he did not intend to refuse it. After thinking about it, simply nodded and put the bank card in his arms. Okay then, I'll take this thing first. Speaking of this, Chen Luo shook his head pretending to be helpless, sighed, and said, it seems that I am really being taken care of this time. Haha. May smiled at the corner of her eyes, covered her mouth and chuckled. Then you can make up for it with cooking in the future. Anyway, Chun, your cooking is so delicious, you can always pay it off in 10 days. Oh, can I ask when can I pay it off? Let me think about it. It won't take long, probably 50 or 60 years. So long? Why do I suddenly feel like I've lost money? Want to regret it? It's too late. The two quarreled for a while, and then, after May finished her breakfast, Chen Luo sent her to the door. After watching her turn around and go to work, he started to take action. After cleaning up briefly, Chen Luo walked out of the room immediately. Pretending to pass the Camaro at the door inadvertently, Chen Luo also began to talk to himself about his whereabouts, and then quickened his pace and walked towards the destination. And just when he walked out no more than 10 meters, the next moment, the Camaro, which had been silent all night, suddenly started up and followed Chen Luo without anyone's control. Relying on his far superior perception than ordinary people, Chen Luo immediately noticed the movement coming from behind him. His heart moved, and he was completely sure of his guess. It seems to be true. There was a meaningful look on his face, and then he walked non-stop towards the handcart trading market 2 blocks away from his home. Half an hour later, when Chen Luo got off the bus, he raised his head, looked at the large store in front of him, nodded slightly, and walked towards the gate without stopping. At the same time, the moment Chen Luo walked into the store, the Camaro that was originally following Chen Luo also slowly drove into the parking lot next to this second-hand car market. He came to an empty parking space and stopped slowly, motionless. Relying on the old-looking paint on the body, this Camaro is almost indistinguishable from other second-hand cars around it, blending in perfectly. Not long after it docked, Chen Luo followed a short, fat black man wearing a floral shirt and a straw hat on his head and walked out. Brother, let me tell you, the cars I have here are definitely the best second-hand cars in New York City, but the quality of them is definitely not as good as here. And don't worry, the prices for second-hand cars here are definitely very fair, and we guarantee you will be satisfied. Ignoring this guy's chattering in his ears, Chen Luo glanced at it and immediately locked onto a certain place. Without any pause in his steps, he quickly walked in the direction of the Camaro just now. Bob, how do you sell this car? He looked in the direction of Chen Luo's finger. However, when Bob saw the Camaro in front of Chen Luo, he was suddenly stunned, and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Chapter 228, Part 1. After thinking about it, he turned back towards the store door and shouted loudly, Manny, which car is this? Go check it out. As soon as he finished speaking, the next moment, a car repairman in work clothes walked out of the store door, looked at the place and shouted back, I don't know, boss. I have never seen this car before. Don't fool me, go check it out quickly. Ignoring the conversation between the two, Chen Luo stepped forward, reached out and touched the lines on the Camaro's body, then opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. Then, when he saw the unique mark in the center of the steering wheel, Chen Luo's eyes flashed. He put his hand on the steering wheel and said thoughtfully, looks like a really nice car. Bob, how much would you sell this car for? After hearing this, Bob suddenly became energetic. He didn't bother to confirm further. He glanced at the car and pondered for a long time. Then he nodded with some difficulty and said, based on the appearance of this car and its unique paint, it's a fixed price and 5,000 questions. Make a deal. Don't think it's expensive, but, well, what did you just say? I say deal. Bob. Opening the car door, Chen Luo smiled and patted the other person's shoulder, then took out the bank card he had prepared and handed it to him, smiling and saying, then, we can get ready to trade. Oh, okay, somewhat confused. Bob took the bank card and took Chen Luo to the store in a daze. After the handover was completed, he watched Chen Luo drive away in the old Camaro, and then he woke up as if from a dream. Subconsciously, he punched his palms in annoyance and sighed deeply. Damn it, why do you feel like this business is a loss? Chen Luo drove the car all the way home, parked the car on the lawn in front of his home, then opened the car door and walked towards his home. Boom. Watching Chen Luo close the car door on the lawn, the stereo in the Camaro suddenly started, making an inexplicable noise, and then fell into silence soon after. In the evening, Chen Luo was preparing dinner. Then, as the door handle turned, Peter's slightly excited voice sounded. Chen, did you see that car outside? Did you buy that? It looks so cool. It has to be said that although the paint on the body of this Camaro looks a bit old, its unique sports car appearance still easily captured Peter's attention. Just one glance, and he already had an affinity for the car. Not a small favor. At this time, behind Peter, May also walked in. After seeing Chen Luo, she also showed a smile on her face and praised, Peter is right, that Camaro looks really good, as long as you like it. Chen Luo nodded with a smile, looked in the direction of Peter, and with a sudden move in his heart, he said casually, well, when you go to college, Peter, I will give this car to you. What do you think? Real? Peter had just put down his school bag. After hearing Chen Luo's words, he jumped 3 feet high. His face was full of uncontrollable excitement, and he looked at Chen Luo with bright eyes. Definitely. Chen Luo's smile did not diminish. He winked at him, and then said, after all, if you don't have a car of your own in the future, then you won't be able to take the girl you like out for a ride. Ahem. After hearing this, May coughed and rolled her eyes at him. Peter is still young. Why are you telling him this? Okay, it's my fault. Chen Luo did not refute, and waved his hand with a smile. Only Peter lowered his head shyly after hearing Chen Luo's words, and scratched his head in embarrassment. Recalling what Chen Luo had just said to him, his heart suddenly rose with anticipation. Obviously, this silly boy has now begun to immerse himself in the scene when he will drive this car and go out to play with Gwen. Thinking of the happy place, his face suddenly filled with a bright smile that could not be hidden at all. So Peter, you have to take good care of this car from now on. Otherwise, I'm afraid it won't be able to wait until you graduate. Chen Luo looked at Peter thoughtfully and said, don't worry, I will do it. Peter nodded solemnly and made a silent decision in his heart. He must look for some books on car maintenance and read them in the future. After all, this is his car after graduating from high school, and he must take good care of it. Okay. After dinner, it was late at night. At this moment, Chen Luo and May had gone back to the room to sleep. Peter was the only one lying on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Obviously, when he learned from Chen Luo that he would be able to own his own car in the future, Peter was still a little excited and his brain was also very excited. Even though his reason told him to go to bed as soon as possible, whenever he thought of the Camaro listening downstairs at the moment, he couldn't help but think of driving the car with Gwen sitting in the passenger seat next to him, and the two of them going out together. A scene during an outing. Thinking of this scene, Peter rolled back and forth on the bed uncontrollably. Boom! However, just as he was thinking about the future, the next moment, an engine roar suddenly sounded and woke him up instantly. What sound? Suddenly a bad premonition flashed through my heart, and I went to the window and looked out. However, just this glance caused his expression to change drastically, because he clearly saw that the Camaro that was listening to the lawn of his house at the moment, which was his future car, slowly drove out of the lawn and gradually disappeared into the distance. My car. Seeing that the car he had received was about to leave like this, Peter couldn't bear it. He jumped out of bed in a hurry and ran to the door of Chen Luo's room and started knocking on the door hastily. What's going on? Wang Zhao. After a while, the door opened, and then Chen Luo poked his head out with hazy, sleepy eyes, looked at Peter, and said with some confusion, Oops, Chen. The Camaro you bought today was stolen. As soon as these words came out, Chen Luo suddenly became energetic. Then, Peter felt his eyes flashing, and then he was surprised to find that Chen Luo had dressed up and walked quickly towards the door. Come on, Peter, let's go see it together. After coming back to his senses, Peter nodded subconsciously and quickly followed Lu. He took out a small electric donkey from the garage, and the two of them got on it one after the other. Then, with Peter guiding the way from behind, the two of them chased the Camaro in the direction where it disappeared. I don't know how long it took, but finally, in an abandoned mine, under the gazes of Chen Luo and Chen Luo, the Camaro finally stopped slowly. Chapter 229, Part 1. Chen, look, he finally stopped. After jumping out of the car, Peter looked at the top of the small mine made of countless ores not far ahead, and subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. On the top of the mine, the Camaro stood there quietly, motionless. Behind Peter, Chen Luo put the e-donkey aside and looked forward, with some inexplicable meaning in his eyes. Chen, let's leave quickly, or the car thief will run away. After seeing Chen Luo standing there quietly without any movement, Peter kept saying anxiously, Don't worry, Peter. Chen Luo's calm voice came. His eyes pointed forward, and the corners of his mouth slightly curved. Aren't you curious why the other party drove the car here? You should have seen it. This place is not suitable for hiding. Peter was stunned when he heard this, and subconsciously looked around. When he saw the scene around him clearly, finally, Peter's eyes couldn't help but reveal a trace of doubt. Yes. Then why did this car thief? Before he finished speaking, Chen Luo stretched out his hand and interrupted. Wait a minute, look. What's happening over there? 460 subconsciously, he looked in the direction of Chen Luo's finger. Then, when Peter saw what was happening at the top of the mine, a look of horror suddenly appeared on his face. What's this? Following his gaze, he saw that the Camaro that was standing quietly on the top of the mine suddenly changed. Click! Under Peter's dull gaze, the body of the Camaro quickly began to change, and a burst of intensive mechanical noises came. In just a few seconds, the Camaro had completely changed its appearance. The original sports car body has long since disappeared, replaced by a tall robot with a height of about 5 meters and a bright yellow skin that resembles a humanoid. On this robot, a pair of azure electronic eyes rotated around, as if observing something. From behind the slightly rounded head, 2 bright yellow iron pieces stretched out like 2 tentacles. It looks unexpectedly cute. After looking around and confirming that there was no danger, the Supreme Robot immediately started his next move. There was a burst of shape-shifting in the hand, and then it transformed into a special illumination lamp, turned on the switch, and then pointed the direction of its illumination toward the sky. Under the extremely dazzling and bright lights, in the dark night sky, a light with a special mark suddenly reflected on the clouds. It looks like it is conveying some message. Looking blankly at the robot in front of him, Peter's whole body was stiff, his face was dull, and he didn't react for quite a while. It's bad, Chen. There's an alien. Finally, when Peter regained his senses again, he seemed to remember something, turned around quickly, and shouted to Chen Luo. It's aliens! Chen, let's run away quickly. Otherwise, if the other party finds us, we won't be able to escape. Peter never imagined that the Camaro bought by Chen Luo was actually an alien who could shapeshift into a robot. Fortunately, he was still doubting who stole their car. Where was the thief? The reason why the car left was because of his own original wishes. There is no doubt that after realizing the other person's true identity, Peter has given up on using it as his future car. Although it is indeed a great thing to have an alien car as his car. Tempting things. Without enough time to feel heartache, Peter quickly pulled Chen Luo and wanted to take him to escape from here. But at this moment, Chen Luo had no intention of leaving. Stopping Peter's movement, Chen Luo took him to find a cover and squatted down. Don't leave in a hurry, Peter. Chen, Fad. Luo's face was surprisingly calm at the moment. He stared at him and said, Peter, think about it carefully. If you choose to run away now, with the current environment around you, do you think you can hide it from the other party? If you are discovered by the other party, the consequences will be beyond your expectation. So our best way now is to hide like this while the other party doesn't notice us, and wait until the other party leaves before we go back. It will be much safer this way. After saying this, Chen Luo paused and continued. What's more, aren't you a little curious about what the other party did just now? Think about it, this is your first time coming into contact with aliens. Don't you want to study carefully and see how they are different from us? After being bewitched by Chen Luo, Peter suddenly fell silent. Although he didn't want to admit it, after seeing the living alien, he did feel arrogantly curious about this alien in his heart. If there was an opportunity to study them up close, Peter wouldn't want to miss it. So after a moment of silence, Peter finally nodded silently. Instead of trying to escape, he quietly poked his head out of the cover and looked straight ahead, watching the other person's movements curiously. Woof woof. However, just after he observed it for a short time, the next moment, behind Peter, a manic-sounding roar came. Subconsciously looking back, when he clearly saw the 2 approaching figures behind him, Peter's face immediately turned extremely pale. Less than 10 meters away from him, he saw 2 giant dogs that were as big as jackals, with spiked collars around their necks. Their bodies were dark and their eyes were red. They were staring at Peter. Saliva unconsciously flowed from the corners of their open mouths, and their 2 front paws kept pulling at the ground, approaching Peter step by step. But for some reason, as for Chen Luo, who was next to Peter at this moment, the 2 giant dogs seemed not to notice each other at all, completely ignoring Chen Luo's existence. Seeing the other party approaching step by step, Peter swallowed subconsciously, stretched out his hand stiffly, waved to the other party, and said with a forced smile, Hi, how are you guys? Woof woof. However, in the face of his overtures, the 2 giant dogs did not appreciate it at all. They roared wildly, accelerated their pace, and rushed towards Peter. Seeing this, Peter's face turned green, and without even thinking about it, he couldn't care less about hiding himself at this moment, so he quickly stood up and planned to escape. Chen, run quickly. Before escaping, Peter did not forget to greet Chen Luo. Looking at the 2 approaching giant dogs in front of him, Chen Luo shook his head helplessly, sighed softly and said, Peter, your luck is really bad. Even this kind of thing can happen to you. Chapter 230, Part 1. If you think about it carefully, it seems that except for Peter's luck breaking out a few years later, being bitten by that special spider, and successfully gaining super ability in other cases, he appears as an unlucky guy. No matter which universe the Spider-Man is in, on his way to becoming a real superhero, the relatives, friends, and even lovers around him will eventually leave him. Compared with Tony, who will have a happy family in the future, Peter is extremely unlucky. With such bad luck, it's no wonder that he would encounter this kind of thing now. Looking at the half-chains around the necks of the 2 giant dogs in front of them, it was obvious that they had just broken free from the chains. Such luck was not easy to come across. What's even more weird is that the eyes of these two giant dogs have been locked on Peter from beginning to end. As for Chen Luo, who is next to Peter at the moment, he is like an invisible person, completely ignored by the other party. Looking at this look, if you didn't know better, you would probably think that Peter had some grudge against them. But in fact, this is just Peter's first meeting with them. If Chen Luo wasn't around today, Peter probably wouldn't be able to escape being chased by these two giant dogs. But since Chen Luo is here now, he naturally won't just watch Peter suffer like this. So, as the two giant dogs gradually approached Peter, when they passed by Chen Luo took action instantly. His hands turned into afterimages, and he reached out to explore. The next moment, the two giant dogs that were originally fierce suddenly let out bursts of whimpering sounds. The fierce light in their eyes faded, and their bodies were shaking violently. Chen Luo's eyes were full of fear. Shaking his head, Chen Luo had no intention of killing him. After giving the other party a brief lesson, he casually threw the two giant dogs aside and ignored them. Once free again, the two giant dogs looked at Chen Luo with fear. They no longer had the thought of chasing Peter, and quickly fled the scene with their tails between their legs. After dealing with the two vicious dogs, Chen Luo turned around and looked at Peter, who was running wildly not far ahead. He shook his head helplessly, and then quickly followed. "Okay, Peter, stop running, stop, it's okay now." Hearing this, Peter paused and looked back subconsciously. When he saw that there was nothing behind him, as Chen Luo said, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. After escaping from the situation of being chased by vicious dogs, when Peter regained his composure again, he suddenly seemed to remember something, and his expression suddenly changed. Subconsciously, he turned back to look in the direction of the alien just now. However, when his eyes turned there again, Peter was shocked to find that the alien had already disappeared again. Where's the alien? Who knows? Chen Luo shrugged lightly, his face as relaxed as ever. Perhaps your actions just now were discovered by it, so it alerted it. This may have caused the other party to leave. Is that so? Hearing this, a look of disappointment suddenly flashed across Peter's face. Although he regretted not being able to continue observing the alien, Peter felt relieved now that the alien had left. In this case, let's go back first. Facing Chen Luo's proposal, Peter had no objection and nodded silently, and then the two of them walked towards home together. After returning home, the two of them made a tacit agreement not to tell Mei what they saw tonight. They simply comforted her with a few words and then said nothing more. They each went back to their rooms to rest. A night of silence. Until the next day, when Peter and Mei went out one after another, Chen Luo had just closed the door, and then a familiar roar of an engine suddenly came from the courtyard. Hearing this voice, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and then he quickly walked to the window and looked towards the courtyard. Sure enough, on the front lawn at this moment, the Camaro that disappeared last night appeared again, standing there quietly, as if it had never moved. Chen Luo was not surprised by the other party's actions. After all, he knew very well that what the other party wanted was still in his hands. Before he got it, the other party would never leave so easily. After thinking about it, Chen Luo did not continue to stay in the room, but silently opened the door and walked quickly in a certain direction ahead. Seeing Chen Luo's movements, the sports car on the lawn suddenly stopped being calm. The engine roared again, and then followed Chen Luo closely, moving forward leisurely. Under Chen Luo's intentional guidance, less than an hour later, Chen Luo finally stopped in an abandoned factory building with huge amounts. Seeing this, behind Chen Luo, the sports car stopped immediately and stopped moving forward. "Please give me flowers." Turning around, Chen Luo looked at the sports car in front of him, walked forward with a calm face, gently knocked on the car window, and said softly, "Okay, stop hiding. You should have discovered us last night, right? It's better to return to your original appearance." After waiting for a while, seeing that there was still no response from the other party, Chen Luo frowned slightly and was about to say something. However, the next moment, another engine roar sounded from behind him, and this sound was approaching him quickly. Looking back, he saw behind him a vehicle that looked like a police car, rushing straight towards him. When the distance between the two was less than 10 meters, the police car immediately started shapeshifting, and soon turned into a giant robot with a height of about 5 or 6 meters, moving its legs and running forward. The only difference between this giant robot and the one Chen Luo saw last night is that the robot in front of him, which was transformed from a police car, has a pair of red electronic eyes, which looks extremely manic and fierce. It makes people shudder. In addition, on the opponent's chest, Chen Luo could also clearly see a special mark that was completely different from that on the robot that transformed from the Camaro behind him. Chen Luo knew that this mark was the mark of an open-air tiger. In addition, Chen Luo, the name of the robot with the Decepticon mark engraved on it, had already been recalled. Roadblock. As for the mark on the robot behind him, it belongs to the Autobot faction that competes with the Decepticons. The two sides are truly mortal enemies. Therefore, after seeing the arrival of his mortal enemy, the Camaro behind Chen Luo suddenly stopped being calm, and immediately began to change with a burst of intensive noise. At the moment when the roadblock was about to approach Chen Luo, Bumblebee, a warrior belonging to the Autobots, finally completed his transformation, jumped up, and flew straight towards the roadblock in front of him. Boom! The next moment, two huge amounts of robots suddenly fought with each other, and a slightly harsh sound of steel friction sounded in the empty factory building. At the same time, next to the two of them, due to the fight between the two, the dust in the sky immediately covered the two of them, making it impossible to see the scene inside for a while. Chapter 231, Part 1. Chen Luo stood aside, quietly watching the fierce battle between the two behemoths in front of him. The harsh sound of metal collisions continued, and from time to time violent sparks emerged from the two men, which looked extremely terrifying. And this is just the beginning. After the two fought for a moment, the barricade suddenly exerted force, briefly pushing the Bumblebee aside, and then raised its right hand. With the drastic changes in the right hand, it turned into a huge black muzzle, and instantly aimed at the target in front of him. The next moment, a burst of shining yellow light gathered inside the muzzle, eventually forming a surging and terrifying energy shell, which blasted straight towards Bumblebee. Facing the sudden attack from the roadblock, Bumblebee reacted very quickly. He turned around nimbly, propped himself on the ground with one hand, and his whole body actually brushed against the opponent's attack, barely dodging it. It has to be said that judging from the current size of Rhubarb 853B, its flexibility is definitely at the top level among the Autobots. Just like now, faced with constant attacks from roadblocks, Bumblebee relied on his agility to dodge them one by one. The opponent's energy cannon attacks did not cause any damage to him. Seeing the other party's performance, Chen Luo on the side was secretly surprised. If when watching the movie before, he didn't understand why Optimus Prime, the leader of the Autobots, looked so differently at Bumblebee. But now after seeing the other party's performance, Chen Luo had some answers in his heart. Despite his size, Bumblebee is a bit petite compared to giants like Optimus Prime and Megatron, but this does not mean that his combat effectiveness is the same. Perhaps in terms of strength and size, the Bumblebee will be at a disadvantage, but in terms of flexibility and combat skills, the Bumblebee also has its own unique advantages. Relying on this advantage of his own, Bumblebee is fully capable of competing with Optimus Prime or Megatron under certain conditions. Just like in those movies that Chen Luo remembers, no matter who the opponent is and how powerful the opponent is, Bumblebee has the ability to deal with it. You can even achieve final victory most of the time. Even if they can't win, Bumblebee can put itself in an invincible position, which is worthy of its reputation as the 50-50 shape-shifting King Kong. In this battle, Bumblebee's 50-50 attributes were activated. No matter what method the roadblock used, Bumblebee was able to securely catch it and counterattack accordingly. As time passed by, the two of them fell into a stalemate smoothly. No one could do anything to the other. After realizing this, Roadblock suddenly became more and more manic. Damn Autobots, get out of here. After hearing what the other party said, even if Bumblebee wanted to fight back, he couldn't speak because his generator was damaged. I can only rely on my own speakers to make some unknown sounds, which sounds a bit inexplicable. Although no one knew what Bumblebee said, judging from the opponent's movements, Bumblebee was still fighting with the roadblock, giving him no chance to get close to Chen Luo. While dealing with Bumblebee's constant attacks, the corner of the roadblock glanced behind Bumblebee from time to time. Chen Luo, who had been watching the whole show, couldn't help but become more and more anxious. As the battle between the two became more and more intense, Lu Zhao knew that if he continued like this, he would very likely be discovered by humans. Once humans discovered their traces, he would want to get close to Chen Luo in the future. It will undoubtedly become more difficult. Thinking of this, the roadblock's attack couldn't help but become more violent. But even so, Bumblebee was still able to catch all his attacks and prevent him from getting closer to Chen Luo. After watching the two fighting for a long time, Chen Luo, who was watching the battle from the sidelines, couldn't help it and started to feel itchy. Nearly 2 months have passed since he was resurrected. So far, he has not fought in any battle, let alone fought against such aliens that he has never seen before. This can't help but cause confusion. Piqued his curiosity. He wanted to try the power of these aliens, so when the two were in a stalemate, Chen Luo finally took a step forward and walked in the direction of the two. Big guy, it looks like you need some help. As Chen Luo's voice came, Bumblebee, who had been in a stalemate with the roadblock, was stunned and subconsciously turned his head to look behind him. Then when he saw Chen Luo's next movements, a bit of astonishment suddenly flashed through his heart, and even his movements couldn't help but become a bit sluggish. And at the moment when he was stunned, this also gave the roadblock an excellent opportunity. Get away. He raised his foot and kicked Bumblebee without any hesitation. Without any precautions, Bumblebee was immediately kicked away by the roadblock more than 10 meters away. The body flew backwards quickly. Without the entanglement of the hornet, the roadblock showed no intention of stopping, and then rushed towards Chen Luo. He came to Chen Luo in an instant and grabbed Chen Luo in his hand. His red electronic eyes suddenly became more fierce and he shouted, "Tell me, where are the glasses that Sam Witwicky posted online? It turns out that just before finding Chen Luo, the Decepticons had successfully invaded the Eagle Country military network and learned a top-secret information called Project Iceman. According to the information, Sam's great-great-great-grandfather, Archibald Witwicky, has information about the whereabouts of their leader, Wickham. The emergence of this news immediately cheered up all the members of the Decepticon side. You must know that hundreds of years ago, their leader, Megatron, embarked on a journey alone to find the source of fire in order to restore the glory of Cybertron. As the most precious treasure in Cybertron, the fire source has the ability to create shape-shifting Vajra, so as long as they can find it and then rely on the power of the fire source, they can have an extremely large army of shape-shifting Vajra. As long as they can with enough troops, it will no longer be difficult to revive Cybertron. What excites all members of the Decepticon side is that after embarking on the journey to find the source of the fire, Megatron sent back news that he had found the whereabouts of the source of the fire. But unfortunately, before he could set out to search for it, due to an inexplicable accident, he was frozen in the Arctic glacier for hundreds of years, and his consciousness fell into a deep sleep. Without being able to move, Megatron would naturally be unable to continue searching for the whereabouts of the source of the fire. However, due to some kind of chance, when Sam's great-great-great-grandfather accidentally broke into the glacier where Megatron was, he inadvertently activated Megatron's sleeping consciousness, and then engraved the coordinates about the source of the fire on Archibald was wearing glasses, and then fell into a deep sleep again. By coincidence, when the Decepticons and the others were searching for information about Archibald on the internet, it was only natural that Sam appeared in their sights. Especially when they discovered the picture of the glasses posted by Sam on the internet, they immediately realized the value of the glasses, so they immediately started taking action. Chapter 232, Part 1. At the beginning, they didn't know that Sam had sold the glasses to Peter at the moment, so the first person they approached was not Chen Luo and the others, but Sam himself. Under their threats and questioning, Sam dared to hide anything and immediately told the truth about all the transactions between himself and Peter. After listening to Sam's explanation, they immediately understood the whereabouts of the pair of glasses. After another investigation, Chen Luo quickly came into their sight. So today, after seeing Chen Luo going out, Lu Zhao got the news and immediately followed him. So the next development was very logical and became what we just saw. Staring at Chen Luo in his hand, Lu Zhao couldn't help but tighten his grip on Chen Luo's right hand, and a cold and stern voice sounded. Tell me the whereabouts of the glasses. If you don't tell me, I will crush you like a bedbug. Lu Zhan has absolute confidence in his own strength. As one of the 18 elites on the Decepticon side, Roadblock's strength cannot be underestimated. Not to mention the weapons he possesses and his opponent's seemingly superb combat skills, they all make him invincible. Although compared to his advantages, the strength of the Roadblock does not appear to be that strong, but in terms of grip strength, it is still easy to crush an ordinary person. After thinking of this, the Roadblock suddenly became more unscrupulous. He still doesn't believe that the other party can remain indifferent in the face of such a threat. Unfortunately, what he didn't expect was that after hearing what he said, Xinjiang's reaction was completely beyond his expectation. Yeah. Chen Luo raised his head slightly, looked directly into the other person's eyes, and the corners of his mouth suddenly raised a slight arc. Then I would like to see how far you can go. I think you are looking for death. After hearing Chen Luo's answer, Lu Zhan's heart became even more violent. His eyes glowed red, and cruel laughter immediately sounded. Interesting, then I want to see how a mere human can be able to withstand me. Wanixia? Come on. The Roadblock stopped talking nonsense, and his right hand immediately began to exert force. More than 10 tons of huge force suddenly burst out and instantly enveloped Chen Luo. It seemed that he wanted to deeply crush it into a ball of flesh. However, after he worked hard for a while, Chen Luo's somewhat impatient voice finally sounded. I asked you, are you okay? Is it possible that as an alien, you only have some strength? Speaking of this, a sneer appeared on Chen Luo's face and said, if your power is only this level, then it may be impossible to hurt me. What did you say? Asshole. Hearing that Chen Luo dared to speak and taunt him, the Roadblock suddenly raged. He stretched out his other hand, folded his hands, and firmly enveloped Chen Luo in his hand. Go to hell. The next moment, the Roadblock's hands suddenly exerted force. With double superposition, its power increased nearly twice, reaching a terrifying height of several 10 tons. With his current strength, Roadblock mentality has gained absolute confidence. This time, the opponent cannot escape no matter what. End it. I said. What are you doing? Looking at the other party's movements, Chen Luo had no expression on his face. He looked at him calmly and asked calmly. Looking at his current appearance, it seems that he has not been affected by the other party at all. His body shows no signs of being crushed and is still intact. How can this be? Looking at the scene in front of him, Roadblock suddenly felt a hint of horror in his heart, and his face was full of disbelief. However, at this moment, Chen Luo didn't give him any time to react and immediately started taking action. The muscles all over his body were tense, and at the next moment, a terrifying force burst out from Chen Luo. Under the impact of this force, Lu Zhan's hands could no longer hold each other, and he subconsciously relaxed. Whoosh! The moment the opponent's hands relaxed, Chen Luo suddenly turned into an afterimage and disappeared into the air. Then, "It's my turn next." Chen Luo's voice suddenly came from the empty air. Immediately afterwards, when the roadblock was looking around, looking for traces of Chen Luo, the next moment, a white light was like lightning, streaking through the air at extremely high speed, and at the same time, it also crossed the body of the roadblock in front of him. When Chen Luo reappeared, he was already behind the roadblock. The two sides stood silently for a moment. Then, the neck of the roadblock instantly began to break. Huge amounts of steel heads fell backwards, and at the same time, the huge body that was several meters high fell violently on the ground. On the ground, bursts of smoke and dust were set off. Chen Luo didn't even look back. He raised one hand, and then, the huge amount of head behind him fell into his hand exactly. The weight of nearly 1,000 kilograms didn't seem to have any impact on him. Chen Luo's face was relaxed. He brought the head in his hand to his eyes and began to look at it carefully. Although Chen Luo has cut off the other party's head, Chen Luo understands that the other party is not completely dead. Unless his head is completely destroyed and the core data contained in his head is severely and irreversibly damaged, the other party will completely fall. If the opponent's head is still intact, then as long as he creates a new body and then moves its core data into the new body, the roadblock will be revived. This is also information that Chen Luo obtained through the scenes in his memory, but it has no impact on his case. After the test just now, Chen Luo already has a rough understanding of the strength of these shape-shifting diamonds. The strength of Roadblock or Bumblebee is actually equivalent to those of third-level elite mutants. So according to this speculation, existences like Optimus Prime or Megatron are at most one level stronger than them. Whether they can truly reach the strength of a king is still unknown, let alone being able to surpass the level of a king like Chen Luo. There is contention. Although he understood that the other party's strength could not pose any threat to him, Chen Luo did not relax at all. After all, he knew very well that the shape-shifting King Kong clan still had abilities that far exceeded the former. Especially for beings like Qingtasha, the goddess of life, or existences like Yuanshi Tianzuan and the Emperor of the Universe. Their strength will never be weaker than Apocalypse, and may even far exceed it. Once the other party comes, the world is likely to face another apocalypse crisis. Moving the head up and down in his hand, Chen Luo was thinking alone when suddenly, a slightly noisy electronic sound came from behind. Chapter 233, Part 1. Dear, strong man, hello? Hearing this voice, Chen Luo was slightly startled, then slowly turned around and looked back. At this moment, Bumblebee, who was originally knocked away by the roadblock, stood up again and came behind Chen Luo with a somewhat heavy body. The body was slightly bent, and the right hand was placed on the chest, expressing their respect to the strong man in front of them with the etiquette unique to their Cybertron planet. While making this gesture, Bumblebee was also shaken in his heart. Because in the few years since he came to Earth, Chen Luo was not the first truly strong person he had seen. Although after coming to Earth, he had heard about the Apocalypse Crisis 8 years ago, and thus knew the existence of the mutant group. However, since the Apocalypse incident, in order to prevent the human side from retaliating, most of the mutant group has hidden their traces. Today, only the X-Men are still active in the world. Therefore, Bumblebee has never seen a real Superman-level combat power in this world in the past few years. Especially for a strong person like Chen Luo, who killed the roadblock instantly after seeing him, Bumblebee already understood the huge gap between the two sides. It is no exaggeration to say that as long as Chen Luo is willing and only needs one move, his end will be the same as the former, defeated instantly. At this level, even if Optimus Prime, the leader of their Autobot clan, arrives, he may not be able to do it. As a famous race in the universe, Bumblebee has existed for hundreds of years, and during this long time, he also understood the division of combat power in this universe. The surface level, as the name suggests, means that the power exceeds that of ordinary people, and the destructive power is about the level of a mutant below level 4. There are many strong people of this level in every living planet. After all, apart from ordinary people, their strength is also at the middle to lower level in the universe. Natural number, there will be no shortage of them. As for those above the surface level, they have extraordinary combat power that can destroy a city, and their strength is around the 4th level mutant. The number of strong men at this level is above the middle level even in the entire universe. In terms of number, compared to the former will also be greatly reduced. Even among cosmic overlord level forces like Asgard, there are only less than 100 extraordinary level experts who are well-deserved cornerstones of combat power. And above the extraordinary level, it is the last stage before reaching the god level, the semi-god level. This level is the stage that Apocalypse and Magneto Eric reached back then. Their strength can even threaten the life of the entire planet, and they are worthy of being considered top figures in the entire universe. Still taking Asgard as an example, due to the decline of his divine power after entering old age, his original strength was at the level of a god, heavenly father, or a single universe, and now he has degraded to the level of a demigod. Apart from him, even Thor, whose strength is only below him now, is only around the peak of the extraordinary level. This shows how rare and precious the strong men at this level are. As for the final level, Bumblebee doesn't know much about it. He only knows that existences of this level are rare even in the entire universe and possess unimaginable terrifying power. In front of such a strong person, even an entire planet can be completely destroyed. He is a well-deserved Overlord-level strong person in the universe. Just like the Mad Titan Thanos, who is widely famous in China, is also at this level. Minister. According to Bumblebee's judgment, the strength displayed by Chen Luo at this moment has faintly surpassed Optimus Prime, the leader of their Autobot clan. One can imagine how powerful he is. Although Optimus Prime's strength has not yet reached the extraordinary level, it is not far behind. I think if he is given more time to grow, it is not impossible to go one step further. Judging from Optimus Prime's current strength, which is at the peak of the surface level, if Chen Luo is really as powerful as he guessed, then his strength may have surpassed the surface level and officially entered the extraordinary level. Such strength, even in the entire universe, is a well-deserved backbone of combat power, and among their Cybertron stars, there are only a few strong men of the older generation who can match it, so Bumblebee was shocked at the same time. They are also extremely respectful. However, because the generator was damaged in a previous battle, Bumblebee can only rely on its own car speakers to communicate, and the speech is also somewhat intermittent. Fortunately, Chen Luo didn't seem to care much about this. He casually threw the huge head aside, came to the other party, and asked directly, "You must be aliens, right? Tell me your purpose of coming here, and why do you want to approach me?" Although he already knew the answers to these questions, he couldn't explain them directly to others. Now that the other party took the initiative to send them to his door, everything he knew seemed very reasonable. And in addition to this, Chen Luo is also very interested in alien civilizations like Cybertron, so he also wants to take this opportunity to learn more about them. Facing Chen Luo's question, Bumblebee did not hesitate and was about to answer. But just when he was about to explain, there were huge amounts of engine roar. Subconsciously, he raised his head and turned around to look around. When Chen Luo saw the scene not far away clearly, his eyes narrowed slightly. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the abandoned factory was surrounded by numerous vehicles arriving one after another. Giant trucks, ambulances with flashing lights on the roof, pink motorcycles, helicopters, etc. It can be said that there is everything you need. The moment these vehicles approached Chen Luo, the other party's car body shook and they all started shape-shifting. Accompanied by bursts of metal friction sounds, within a short while, the surrounding vehicles had greatly changed their appearance, transforming into shapes similar to the Bumblebee in front of them. Through the unique badges on these robots, there is no doubt that they are all Autobots who belong to the Autobots just like Bumblebee. Dewang Zhao most of the other Autobots are about the same size as Bumblebee. There are definitely some that are smaller like the Autobots that were transformed from motorcycles, but compared to the Autobots that were transformed from that giant truck, their size is much worse. With a huge size of nearly 10 meters, even if the Bumblebee is standing next to him, it looks like a baby, full of intimidation. Looking at the other party's familiar appearance, Chen Luo already understood the other party's identity without any introduction. The leader of the Autobots and the mortal enemy of the Decepticons, Team Optimus Prime. The whole body was red and blue, and a pair of blue electronic eyes looked straight at Chen Luo on the ground. Then, Optimus Prime's heavy yet gentle voice sounded. Chen Luo, my name is Optimus Prime. I'm here today because of something in your hand. Chen Luo definitely knew the purpose of the other party's visit, but he didn't tell him. He just looked at the other party quietly, waiting for the other party's explanation. Chapter 234, Part 1. Seeing Chen Luo's unmoved look, Optimus Prime didn't show anything strange and continued to speak. The reason why we came to Earth from our home planet of Cybertron this time is because our planet's most precious treasure, the fire source, accidentally fell to Earth. In order to find the whereabouts of the source of the fire, our Autobots' mortal enemy, the Decepticons, have now come here. Unfortunately, as early as decades ago, the leader of the Decepticon clan, Megatron, had already arrived. Got here, and after his search, he has successfully discovered the whereabouts of the source of fire. Having said this, Optimus Prime paused and continued in a heavier voice. However, due to some accident, the other party seemed to have suddenly lost his trace, but all the clues he got about the whereabouts of the source of fire were left on a human's belongings. And this thing is the glasses worn by the explorer, Captain Archibald Witwicky, back then. It is also the pair of glasses that you and Peter got from Sam Witwicky a few days ago. On that pair of glasses, the map of the source of fire left by you, Megatron, has been engraved. It can be said that as long as you have these glasses, you can rely on the location on the map to find the true whereabouts of the source of fire. So in order to get the source of fire, if anyone dares to stand in front of the Decepticons, they will never show mercy. So for the safety of you 983, Chen, it's best to leave the pair of glasses you got to us for safekeeping. And I will promise you that as long as you trust us, if a Decepticon comes to your door in the future, we will block everything for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Bumblebee, who had been silent the whole time, was moved. He looked at Chen Luo, who had not yet expressed his opinion, and immediately stood up without thinking. Obviously he wanted to say something at this moment, but because of the damaged microphone, Bumblebee had to keep switching his car audio if he wanted to say what he meant. Therefore, in order to express accurately, he began to constantly change his channel, and his words were somewhat intermittent. Bumblebee, what do you want to say? Seeing Bumblebee's appearance, he was fully armed and had a giant cigar in his mouth. He reached out to take off the cigar and flicked the ashes, making a rough sound. Hearing this, Bumblebee suddenly became a little eager and began to dance and wave to everyone, as if he wanted to explain Chen Luo's situation to them. In fact, what Bumblebee wants to tell Optimus Prime and them now is the overwhelming strength, bibk, that Chen Luo showed just now. In Bumblebee's opinion, it is much more reliable to have such an unfathomable strong person to protect these glasses than to simply take them back and protect them. After all, in terms of strength, Chen Luo could instantly kill the roadblock. Although Optimus Prime also had the strength to defeat the roadblock, compared with Chen Luo, he still couldn't defeat him any farther. Extraordinary, extraordinary powerful man. Bumblebee pointed in the direction of Chen Luo and said intermittently, "What did you say? Extraordinary?" After hearing this, everyone was stunned. They all turned their heads and looked in the direction of Chen Luo, and their hearts were shocked. "Bumblebee, do you know what you're talking about?" Ironhide looked at him suspiciously, with a hint of disdain in his tone. "Is there such a powerful person on this planet? You must have seen it wrong, right? Since the Autobots like Ironhide have only arrived on Earth in the past 2 months, they have no idea about the strong people here, and they only rely on the ordinary humans he usually sees as a reference. According to the intelligence he collected, the combat power of those humans could not even compete with the weakest small Cybertronians on their planet. He really could not think of any strong people in such a weak race. However, what he didn't know was that the next moment he said these words, Chen Luo suddenly swayed not far away and disappeared in an instant. In just a moment, when Chen Luo appeared again, he was already above Teppei's shoulders, looking sideways at him, and said with interest, "Big guy, you seem a little dissatisfied? What, do you want to try fighting with me? Let me see what's the difference between your strength and that big guy just now?" After saying that, Chen Luo turned to look at the place. Hearing this, Teppei subconsciously froze and followed Chen Luo's gaze. When he finally saw clearly the huge metal head that fell to the ground behind Chen Luo, he was instantly shocked, and a trace of emotion finally emerged in his voice. A look of shock. Is this a roadblock? As a member of the Decepticons who have been fighting with their Autobots for hundreds of years, Ironhide is naturally no stranger to Roadblock, an elite member of the Decepticons. Just now, because his attention was always on Bumblebee, he didn't pay much attention to Chen Luo. When he finally noticed the original location of Chen Luo, especially when he saw the head of Roadblock placed there. Once there, Iron Pie's heart suddenly trembled. Almost instantly, he realized something. Thinking back to the terrifying speed that Chen Luo showed just now, which left him completely unable to react, at this moment, he already had a shocking guess in his mind. When he turned to look at Chen Luo again, his tone was full of disbelief, and he asked with a trembling voice, "You solved the roadblock? What do you think?" Chen Luo did not answer, but asked with a smile. Teppei was stunned for a moment, and was about to speak. At this time, Bumblebee on the side would not give his rash companion the opportunity to continue to offend a strong man like Chen Luo. He immediately turned on the projection equipment in his body and broadcast the entire scene that had just happened. Released. The fierce fighting sound instantly attracted everyone's attention. Looking along the source of the sound, finally, about the south side where Chen Luo fought with the roadblock before, also came into view. They were not made to wait long, only a few seconds at most. Seeing that the roadblock fell into Chen Luo's hands in such a short period of time, everyone's hearts were shocked, and the eyes they looked at Chen Luo began to change instantly. They all know the strength of roadblock, which is definitely close to the peak of the surface level. Even Optimus Prime, the strongest among them, although there is a huge gap between them, the latter will definitely do it if he wants to solve it. Not as easy as Chen Luo. Even if Optimus Prime's strength can reach the surface level limit, then Chen Luo's performance must definitely be a level higher than the former. In their opinion, such strength is definitely extraordinary. After realizing Chen Luo's strength, the venue suddenly became silent, and everyone looked at each other in silence. After a moment of silence, Optimus Prime's voice finally sounded again. Chapter 235, Part 1. A strong man on the human side, your strength is enough to gain our respect. But the source of fire is our most precious treasure on Cybertron, so we hope you can help us find the whereabouts of the source of fire. Once the source of fire is obtained by the Decepticons, based on my understanding of Megatron, what he wants to do next is probably to directly use the source of fire to create a mechanical army capable of conquering the Earth. At that time, your human world will also be in crisis. Having said this, Optimus Prime also placed his right hand across his chest, made the same gesture as Bumblebee before, and said in a deep voice, "I'm here to assure you that we Autobots are different from the Decepticons. We are a peace-loving race. Only leaving the source of fire to us for safekeeping is the safest choice. We will not use the source of fire to create an army and invade the homeland of mankind. This is my promise to mankind." As the leader of the Autobots, in the name of Optimus Prime, listening to the explanation of the big guy in front of him, Chen Luo had no doubts in his heart. After all, after watching the original plot, he naturally knew that the Autobots were indeed fighting on the side of humans. In the final battle with Megatron, Optimus Prime, who knew he was outmatched, asked Sam, who was holding the source of fire, to destroy it directly in order to prevent the source of fire from falling into his opponent's hands. From this point, it can be seen that the other party does not have the intention to dominate the world with the help of the source of fire. But even so, Chen Luo did not intend to follow the other party's wishes. After all, he also had great expectations for the fire source, an artifact. With his understanding of this artifact, Chen Luo naturally understands the power of this artifact. Through the energy released by the fire source, a huge army of shape-shifting Vajras can be created instantly, and their strength is stronger than that of most humans. Even the weakest small shape-shifting Vajra's combat effectiveness is comparable to that of fully armed soldiers, even beyond it. And the most terrifying thing is that the range of fire source energy is also extremely wide, ranging from airplanes and tanks to small kitchen appliances. As long as they are saturated with fire source energy, they can be given life, thus officially becoming a shapeshifter. King Kong. If it is not controlled and manufactured in unlimited quantities, it is very likely that billions of shape-shifting King Kong armies will be produced all over the world in a short period of time. With such a quantity, the disaster it can cause will probably be no less than that of the apocalypse crisis back then. The reason why Chen Luo wanted to hold the fire source in his hands was because of its potential to quickly create a large number of troops and form a huge force in a short time. After all, he knew very well that it had only been a few years since the Mad Titan came to Earth. Not to mention the opponent's strength. If all the Chitauri army under the opponent's command were to descend on Earth, with the current power of Earth, they probably wouldn't be able to do it. Withstand. So in order to deal with the coming crisis, he must also be fully prepared. He has already decided to hold the fire source in his hands, but now Chen Luo still has another concern in his mind, that is, the shape-shifting diamonds created by the fire source energy. They are all violent and extremely aggressive beings. For he didn't have the slightest idea how to make these new armies truly surrender to him. Thinking of this, Chen Luo couldn't help but feel a headache. Just when he was distressed, suddenly, a familiar voice came from his mind. Ding! It has been detected that there is a need in the host's heart. Now let's start choosing. Choice 1. Join the Autobot camp and defeat the Decepticons. Prerequisite. Megatron is dead. Reward. The artifact forcibly recognizes the owner's authority. Option 2. Join the Decepticon camp, defeat the Autobots. Prerequisite. Optimus Prime dies, and rebuild Cybertron. Reward. Biological force field ability. Biological force field? Hearing the prompts from the system, especially after hearing the reward for the second choice, Chen Luo's heart was shocked, and a glimmer of light subconsciously appeared in his eyes. He knows the role of this ability very well. For example, the Superman from the next universe can pick up planes with his bare hands and even pull the planet directly. In addition to his infinite divine power, biological creatures, the factor of force field is also indispensable. If there is no biological force field covering the aircraft or even the entire planet, then no matter how powerful Superman's power is, he will not be able to achieve this level. 0. Please ask for flowers. After all, if you want to achieve this step, you must ensure that the force of the object you want to lift reaches a balanced state. Otherwise, if only one point is affected by Superman's huge force, then the first two will definitely not be safe. On the contrary, it is likely to be shattered in an instant. In addition to ensuring that the biological force field can act evenly on the target object, the ability of Superman to move freely in space is also a top priority. It can be said that as long as he has this ability, he also has the ability to survive in space. Coupled with his own super speed regeneration ability, the survival ability will be enhanced again. Finally, if the biological force field is strong enough, it can also provide the host with strong defense. Otherwise, when Superman was attacked by the enemy's fierce artillery fire, there would be no wonder that even his own clothes could not be damaged. The reason is, also because he is protected by a biological force field all over his body. Thinking of the various benefits that the biological force field could bring to him, Chen Luo was really excited for a moment. But this only lasted a few seconds. After coming back to his senses, Chen Luo felt a little regretful, but he still made a choice quickly. System, I choose the first one. Although the biological force field is indeed very useful to him, in his opinion, it is obviously not the first reward that is more suitable for him now. Not to mention that according to his original plan, he wanted to successfully hold the source of fire in his hands, but just talking about the second option at the end, he knew very well how difficult it would be to rebuild Cybertron, if his memory was correct. If you want the withering planet to be revitalized again, you need to sacrifice the Earth. He would never accept such a price under any circumstances. Coupled with his future plans, it is also necessary for him to have the source of fire in his hands. If he can complete the first choice, then he will most likely be able to successfully master this magical thing. However, just in case, Chen Luo still asked the system about the first reward. Chapter 236, Part 1. After understanding it, Chen Luo finally understood the function of this reward. As the name suggests, this reward can force the artifacts issued by the system, such as the Blood Cup, or the famous and powerful artifacts in this universe, to recognize him as the master. As long as he successfully recognizes the master, he can freely use this weapon. The full power of the artifact. Just like the artifact of the fire source, as long as he can complete the choice, then he will truly master the power of the fire source, and can freely give real life to those mechanical products, becoming an existence like their creator. Affected by the power of the fire source, after being created, these new shape-shifting King Kongs will truly surrender to him and become a huge force that belongs to him alone. It can be said that as long as he is willing, he can create a huge army with millions of people and good combat effectiveness in a short period of time. With the power of this army, Chen Luo has sufficient confidence, even if Chitauri, the 263, army has all descended on the earth, and he also has the strength to defeat the opponent. Similarly, with the potential of this army, even if he wants to conquer the universe one day, this army can be regarded as the main combat force of his forces. If it does not count the level of strong men above the extraordinary level, with the strength of this army, the potential for war has already laid the foundation for becoming a cosmic hegemonic force. But because Chen Luo's strength has not yet reached the level of Thanos, even if he truly possesses an artifact like the fire source, he will not be able to become the overlord of the universe like Thanos. Perhaps only when his power truly reaches that level can he truly have the ability to compete with Thanos. And this requires his own efforts. Having made a choice in his heart, Chen Luo's eyes flashed with light. He slowly raised his head and looked directly at Dilly. Cooperation is okay, but there is something I want to say first. Speaking of this, a smile gradually appeared on Chen Luo's face, and he said with great interest, I am also very interested in the fire source you just mentioned. If possible, I hope that the fire source can eventually be handed over. Keep it for me. As soon as the words fell, the next moment, the whole place suddenly became dead silent. This is impossible. Finally, when Optimus Prime came to his senses and was about to speak, the next moment, Ironhide beside him couldn't help it and retorted loudly. The source of fire is our Cybertron's treasure, and we will never leave it to humans. Ignoring the other party, Chen Luo kept his eyes on Optimus Prime in front of him, said nothing, and quietly waited for the other party's answer. After a moment of silence, Optimus Prime finally reached out and interrupted Tiepi behind him. Then he looked at Chen Luo and asked in a deep voice, Chen, I want to know, if the fire source is handed over to you for safekeeping, can you guarantee the safety of the fire source in the future? You should understand that once the power of the fire source is leaked, it will be a terrible thing for the world. A huge amount of disaster. In fact, Optimus Prime did not resist Chen Luo's request. After all, he knew in his heart that although the fire source could create new mechanical life, the hearts of those creatures were filled with killing, and they instinctively longed for it, destroying everything around them. It is an existence that is incompatible with the peace-loving character of their Autobots. Therefore, the reason why Optimus Prime wants to retrieve the fire source is to prevent the Decepticons from getting this artifact. After all, according to their long-standing code of conduct, they are likely to use the power of the fire source to create unscrupulous if a mechanical army is sent out. Once this happens, the planet may be in danger. But if the fire source is kept by Chen Luo, as a member of the human race, Optimus Prime does not believe that the other party has any thoughts of destroying the world. Coupled with the other party's suspected extraordinary level of combat power, if the fire source is taken away, leave it to him for safekeeping, and safety will indeed be greatly guaranteed. And the most important thing is that Optimus Prime understands in his heart that although the ability of a treasure like the fire source is very powerful, only silicon-based beings like them can succeed if they want to use this treasure. But if someone like Chen Luo for a carbon-based life form, it is impossible to successfully manipulate this treasure. Thinking of this, Optimus Prime suddenly felt relieved. Although he had made a vague decision in his heart, he still had some doubts about Chen Luo's position. He was worried that once the other party found out that he could not use the fire source and turned to cooperate with the Decepticons, what would happen to the situation? It will undoubtedly be very bad for them. If something like this really happens, with the power of Chen Luo and the Decepticons, even as the leader of the Autobots, Optimus Prime has no confidence in winning. Just when he was thinking this, the next moment, Chen Luo finally spoke, and his next words finally succeeded in dispelling Optimus Prime's inner doubts. About this, I think you don't have to worry. The expression on Chen Luo's face became much more solemn at this moment. You have been on Earth for a while, right? I think you have heard about the apocalypse crisis 8 years ago. Definitely. Optimus Prime nodded, thinking of the information he had obtained when he first came to Earth, especially through the internet, when he searched for the battle between the coalition forces of various countries against Apocalypse. For Apocalypse and Magneto, give him it left a very deep impression. 0 Just by looking at the scenes recorded in the video, Optimus Prime was able to confirm that these two people had definitely passed the extraordinary level and become demigod-level existences. Only this level of power has the ability to clean up all life on an entire planet. If it hadn't been for the emergence of other strong mutants, which led to the demise of Apocalypse, I am afraid that the world today might really be completely changed. Hearing Chen Luo suddenly mention this matter, Optimus Prime was confused for a while, and then he immediately reacted, as if he thought of something. And while his heart moved slightly, he subconsciously said, "Does this matter have anything to do with you?" That's right. Seeing him reacting so quickly, Chen Luo didn't hide anything and nodded decisively to admit, "I did participate in the battle back then. If you don't believe this, you can go to Xavier's school and ask. If you can't find the way, I can take you there too." Having said this, Chen Luo paused, and after a moment, he continued, "I am very accustomed to living in this world, so I don't want others to disrupt it. I think at this point, our position it should be consistent. So you can rest assured that the source of fire is definitely the safest in my hands. As long as I am here, no matter who it is, there will be no possibility of using the source of fire to threaten the world." Looking at Chen Luo's magnanimous eyes, Tianju was silent for a long time. After hearing Chen Luo's explanation just now, Optimus Prime's doubts disappeared, and his eyes looking at Chen Luo became much softer. As a peace-loving Autobot, Optimus Prime also admired Chen Luo's performance in standing up to Apocalypse. Although the other party may have lied to gain his trust, looking at Chen Luo's with his unabashed eyes, he somehow felt a little more trust in Chen Luo. After thinking for a moment, he finally made a decision in his heart, slowly stretched out his palm, and then Optimus Prime's voice sounded again. "I agree to your request." Hearing this, a smile appeared on Chen Luo's face, and he also stretched out his palms and clasped them tightly. Then, happy cooperation. Chapter 237, Part 1. After reaching an intention to cooperate, Chen Luo asked Optimus Prime and the others to leave first, while he took Bumblebee towards home. After some discussion, Chen Luo and Optimus Prime have already discussed a plan. When he goes home and gets the pair of glasses that mark the location of the fire source, Chen Luo will be led by Bumblebee to the meeting point, and then let's set out together to find it. Chen Luo had no objection to this. After a brief discussion, Chen Luo left with Bumblebee. Watching Chen Luo's disappearing back, Tiepi, who had been patient for a long time, finally couldn't help himself and asked, "Optimus Prime, do you really want to trust that human? What if he can't be trusted? If it is true, as he just said, that he has participated in the battle with Apocalypse, it proves that he is not an evil person. But if that is all a lie, once the other party controls the power of the fire source, then it will be a huge amount of disaster for this world." Next to Ironhide, RC, who was only about 3 meters tall, was all pink and came from shapeshifting on a motorcycle, analyzed calmly. "Hey, are you thinking too much? I think the human named Chen is pretty good. It suits my 20-year-old taste. If that Bumblebee guy hadn't contacted him first, I would have wanted to go to the human world with him. The music they have here is really good. I don't know if you have heard it, but the song, Come and Get You Love, is awesome. It's really good. I highly recommend you listen to it when you have time." The Autobot whose body was dark blue and whose body shape was about the same as that of Bumblebee spoke nonchalantly. "Okay, Phantom, shut up." Tiepi waved his hand impatiently, and the silver-white, shining metallic whiskers on his chin began to shake violently. His tone was full of disdain. "If you really like it that much, that human, then you can be his little pet. We won't stop you." As soon as he said these words, Phantom's voice suddenly stopped, and he looked at him with displeasure. With a flick of his hands, 2 giant hand cannons with dazzling yellow light appeared above his forearms, pointed in the direction of the iron sheet, and said coldly, "Damn fat man, I didn't hear what you just said. Do you want to say it again?" Seeing the opponent's movements, Tiepi's mouth twitched slightly, and he took out the weapon hanging from his waist without showing any signs of weakness, pointed it in the direction of the Phantom, and said with a smile, "Little guy, do you think I'm afraid of you? I remember when I went to the battlefield. You weren't even born yet. You want to threaten me with this, but you're still too young. Damn fat man, if you don't retire even though you are already so old, you may be too old to walk one day and be killed on the battlefield." "What are you talking about? Little thing, even if you are killed by those Decepticon bastards first, nothing will happen to me. But don't worry, I will avenge you after you are killed. One old guy, you don't need to worry about this. You should take care of yourself first. Okay, stop arguing. Finally, Optimus Prime couldn't stand the two of them continuing to argue and stopped them. Turning around and looking at everyone, Optimus Prime paused, and then said in a deep voice, I understand your concerns, but don't worry. I have my reasons for agreeing to cooperate. Perhaps you still don't understand that the fire source is the treasure of our planet Cybertron, and only we can use its ability normally. If it is placed in the hands of humans, they will not be able to use it normally. So you don't have to worry about any problems. On the contrary, with Chen's strength, perhaps leaving the fire source to him for safekeeping is the safest way. Except for Optimus Prime, no one else present had ever actually seen the fire source, an artifact, and knew nothing about its limitations. It was only after Optimus Prime explained it that everyone suddenly realized it. So that's it. That means that if we leave the fire source to that human being for safekeeping, we don't have to worry about what kind of disaster the other party will use the fire source to cause, right? If that's the case, this is indeed a good choice. RC nodded thoughtfully. After this explanation, everyone who was a little confused finally understood. They nodded subconsciously and breathed a sigh of relief. After seeing that everyone had no objections, Optimus Prime immediately spoke. Since everyone has no objections, let's go first. I think it won't be long before Chen can get the glasses. By then, we should set off to find the whereabouts of the source of the fire. After saying this, he led everyone towards the meeting point. The other side. Shortly after the two sides separated, Chen Luo had already fallen to the ground. Among the huge bodies that had lost their heads, the chest area of the body was blocked. Click. Along with a sound full of metallic texture, a small silver-white robot emerged from the chest. Listening to the alarm bell coming not far away, Luan didn't dare to stay here and hurriedly disappeared. An hour later, Fanluan finally arrived at a safe area. Recalling everything that happened before, the death of Roadblock, the terrifying strength shown by Chen Luo, the arrival of Optimus Prime and others, and the whereabouts of the fire source. All kinds of intelligence were gathered one after another, and then through the unique signal channel between Decepticon members, this information was instantly spread to the minds of Decepticon members all over the world. After receiving the information from Confusion, Decepticon members from all over the world immediately reacted. In a certain military base in the Eagle Kingdom, with the inspectors inside the base exclaiming and everyone watching in shock, a Raptor fighter jet flew out of the vast airport of the base without anyone's 590 order. It suddenly took off, and the speed was extremely astonishing. Before anyone could react, it quickly disappeared into the sky. Above an altitude of 10,000 meters, the Raptor fighter jet is rushing forward rapidly. At the same time, looking through the fighter plane from the cabin, there is no one. Without anyone controlling it, the purpose of the fighter plane is very clearly heading towards New York. All members of the Decepticons, this is Starscream, have now found clues about the source of the fire. The clues about the source of the fire are now in the hands of a human named Chen Luo. The target is very likely to be a super powerful person. We can't compete with them alone, so we can only win when all Decepticon members gather together. So now my plan is for the Decepticon members to gather in the direction of New York. After the other party successfully finds the source of the fire, we will start to snatch it. Vertigo received. Noisy received. Attack received. In addition to sending messages to all Decepticon members, Starscream also contacted Confusion individually and told him, Confusion, your mission is to follow the target. Just wait for the other party to successfully find the fire source, and then send us the target's location. Then I will bring other Decepticon members to support. Confusion received. After contacting Starscream, Confusion's eyes flashed with a deep red light, and he immediately began to act. Chapter 238, Part 1. On the other side, Chen Luo got into the car, and Bumblebee carried him through the bustling urban area. Looking at the luxury supercars speeding past, Chen Luo didn't know what he thought of. He shook his head slightly and said with some emotion, Bumblebee, by the way, don't you think your body looks a little too worn? Have you ever thought about replacing it? How about it? Do you want me to help you repair and renovate it? Don't worry, I know a guy who is very good at mechanical modification. If you let him take action, you will definitely be able to transform yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, Bumblebee suddenly braked and stopped in place. Just at this moment, beside Bumblebee, a sports car with yellow and black body, smooth lines and extremely cool shape was driving past rapidly. With a burst of powerful engine roar, it disappeared into the distance like lightning. Before Chen Luo could say anything more, Bumblebee suddenly turned the car around and started running at full speed, chasing the sports car in front of him. In less than a minute, with Bumblebee galloping at full speed, the distance between him and the sports car in front of him was getting closer and closer. Finally, when he passed the body of the sports car, suddenly, a burst of light instantly scanned his side. The body of the sports car quickly disappeared. Then, Bumblebee turned its head coolly and continued to drive in the direction of Chen Luo's house. However, on the speeding road, after the scan just ended, Yin Wang's body also began to change rapidly. The body structure quickly moved closer to the sports car, and the layer of paint on the body's surface quickly changed from dilapidated to extremely smooth and brand new. In less than 10 seconds, Bumblebee underwent a magnificent transformation, instantly rising from a value of $5,000 to tens of millions, along with the roar of the powerful engine. Looking at the figure of the supercar speeding past, countless envious gazes were immediately left on the spot. Not bad, Bumblebee. I can't tell you that you still have this kind of ability. It's really amazing. Sitting in the car, Chen Luo saw all the changes in Bumblebee. Although he had already expected it, when he actually saw this scene, he couldn't help but be shocked, and a look of admiration could not help but appear on his face. Faced with Chen Luo's praise, Bumblebee didn't say anything, but silently turned on the stereo on the car. Suddenly, cheerful music sounded. It didn't take long for Chen Luo to successfully return to his destination. Bumblebee slowly came to the lawn in front of his house and stopped. Then, the car door opened automatically, and Chen Luo stepped out of the car. Chen Luo patted the car body gently and said softly, "Bumblebee, please stay here for one night, and we will set off tomorrow." Bumblebee didn't speak, but the car lights in front of him turned on to show that he understood. The time soon came to night. Chen Luo had prepared dinner early and was waiting for Peter and the others to come back. Suddenly, an uncontrollable exclamation came from outside the door. "What a beautiful sports car!" The door suddenly opened, and Peter came to the living room with an excited look on his face. He quickly walked up to Chen Luo, his tone even more excited. "Chen, is that sports car parked at the door your new one? It's so cool." Seeing Peter's excited look, Chen Luo smiled and patted the back of his head, rolled his eyes, and then said calmly, "How about Peter? It seems like you like that car very much, right? Do you want to sit in it? Sit? Real?" Peter's eyes lit up, and he nodded impatiently. Although Peter has always behaved very maturely, in the final analysis, he is still just a teenager, so he naturally has no resistance to such a cool-looking sports car. "Then come and see with me." Without any explanation, Chen Luo immediately led Peter to the door, walked up to Bumblebee, opened the door on the driver's seat, turned around and signaled, "Okay, Peter, come in quickly." "Peter." "But, Chen, isn't this the driver's seat? I haven't learned to drive yet." "Don't worry, I have a way." Chen Luo smiled and pushed Peter, pressed him on the driver's seat, and then closed the door with a bang. Seeing that the other party finally made it to the carriage, Chen Luo could no longer hide the smile on his face. With a half-smile on his face, "How are you, Peter? Are you ready?" Peter nodded repeatedly and excitedly touched the steering wheel in front of him. At the same time, he did not forget to ask, "Are you ready, Chen? What should I do next?" "You don't have to think so much next. Just let Bumblebee handle it." "Huh?" Upon hearing this, Peter's face subconsciously showed a hint of doubt. "Bumblebee? What is that?" Chen Luo smiled and did not answer. Instead, he reached out and patted the car body gently and said with a smile, "Okay, Bumblebee, I will leave this kid to you." Before Peter could react, just as Chen Luo finished speaking, suddenly, there was an engine roar, and the car began to shake slightly. Such a sudden change immediately made Peter panic. "Chen, what's going on? What happened?" "It's nothing." A different smile appeared on Chen Luo's face, then said, "I think, Peter, you still have an impression of Bumblebee? After all, you just met him not long ago." The next moment, as if to match Chen Luo's words, a loud sound came from the speakers in the car at the right time. "Peter, hello. I'm Bumblebee." The moment he heard this, Peter's eyes immediately widened with horror written on his face. This is, the memory of last night appeared in his mind involuntarily, and as if he understood something, Peter's voice began to tremble. "Alien?" Rumble tongue. As soon as he finished speaking, the roar of the engine instantly increased nearly twice as much, and the wheels began to rotate rapidly, and then jumped forward amidst Peter's terrified screams. Seeing the scene of Bumblebee carrying Peter and running around, Chen Luo stood there without any movement, but started to admire it with interest. After a while, as Peter's shouts gradually became weaker, finally, the Bumblebee returned to the original place again and slowly stopped in the lawn. Chapter 239, Part 1. Boom. The car door opened, and Peter staggered out of the car, half kneeling on the lawn, breathing heavily and retching at the same time, as if he wanted to vomit. Finally, after a while, Peter's body finally stopped shaking, his breathing gradually became steady, and his body finally gained strength, and he stood up again with difficulty. Staring at Chen Luo with wide eyes, Peter's eyes were full of resentment. Ahem. Looking at the other person's eyes, Chen Luo pretended to cough a few times, walked forward, smiled and patted his shoulder, and then explained, "Peter, you don't have to look at me like this. I'm not doing this for you, okay?" "Really? Then can you tell me, What good will this do to me? Peter rolled his eyes, disbelief written all over his face. Chen Luo didn't have any legitimate reason. He just wanted to tease him, but even so, Chen Luo still pretended to be serious and explained, Peter, you are still too young now, and you spend all day in the library and rarely have contact with other people. This habit is not very good. So in order to increase the courage in your heart and be able to face the outside world bravely when you grow up, let me teach you the first lesson today. Speaking of this, Chen Luo's tone became more serious, and he looked at Peter with a serious face and said, Peter, think about it. If you can make friends with aliens like Bumblebee, will you still be afraid of contact with other people in the future? Think about it. You can make friends with an alien now. Opportunity for alien friends. Wouldn't that be cool? Hearing this, Peter's heart skipped a beat, and a look of excitement flashed across his face. After all, Peter is just a 15 or 16-year-old kid now. He is at the age when he is curious about everything. Usually, just a sports car can make him very excited. Now, this sports car can also have an alien. Human attributes. This attraction is almost full for him. Thinking that he would be able to make friends with aliens he had never seen before, Peter was already excited just thinking about that scene. Although he was very excited at the moment, he had never come into contact with aliens before, so Peter was still a little worried. As if seeing his worry, Chen Luo smiled and comforted, Don't worry, Peter, it's okay. I have been in contact with this big guy before. I believe you will become good friends in the future. It has to be said that Peter has an extraordinary amount of trust in Chen Luo. After hearing his words, Peter seemed to have received some kind of guarantee, and his mood quickly calmed down. His face showed excitement again, and he looked back at Bumblebee behind him, somewhat eager to try. Regarding Peter's reaction, Chen Luo was not surprised at all, and said with a smile, Then you just get along well for a while, Peter. I'll call you when May comes back. Having said that, he didn't care how Peter and Bumblebee would get along, and turned around and walked back home. Here, Peter was sitting in the carriage. After a while of communication with Bumblebee, he finally had some understanding of Bumblebee's situation. Although the communication between the two was somewhat difficult due to the damage to the sound-producing device, this did not stop Peter's curiosity at all. Perhaps it was because the two were born with a good rapport. After just chatting for a while, the relationship between them had already blossomed. Got a lot more familiar with each other. Give it to me. In the carriage, Peter patted his chest hard and said with determination on his face, Bumblebee, I happen to be studying some books on mechanics recently. Give me a while, and I will definitely be able to help you make a new sound-producing device. When that time comes, you can really speak. As soon as he finished speaking, the next moment, there was a sudden noise from the speakers in the car. After searching hard for a long time, CCDG, there was finally a different sound in the speaker. Thank you, friend. Hearing this, the smile on Peter's face became brighter and brighter. You're welcome, my friend. Then, just as Peter was happily continuing to communicate, suddenly there was a knocking sound outside the car window. Lowering the car window, Peter stuck his head out. When he saw the strange figure standing in front of him, there was a hint of doubt in his eyes subconsciously, and he asked, Hello, sir. What can I do for you? Outside the car window, Phil Coulson, wearing a suit, held a tablet-like instrument in his hand. After scanning the car body, he looked at the red signal displayed on the instrument. Suddenly, his face gradually became serious. Kid, I think you should get out of the car. While saying this, Phil Coulson slowly put down the instrument in his hand and quietly reached behind him with his right hand. Seeing this, Peter's eyes became even more confused, and he looked at the other person subconsciously. Then, he seemed to realize something, and a trace of nervousness suddenly appeared on his face. Glancing at the carriage unconsciously from the corner of his eye, Peter forced himself to calm down, as if he still held a glimmer of hope in his heart, and asked again, Sir, why did you come to my house? If you want to find Aunt May, she is still working outside. Maybe you can leave a phone number first, and I will tell her when Aunt May comes back. Looking at Peter's unnatural expression, how could the experienced Phil Coulson not notice it at all? He frowned, and his expression suddenly became extremely serious. His eyes kept roving between Peter and the supercar he was in. Soon, a flash of enlightenment flashed in his eyes, and he suddenly understood something. Child, I think you should know that you are with an alien now, right? Not good. Hearing this, Peter still didn't understand the other party's intention. His expression changed, and he planned to call Bumblebee to escape without even thinking about it. Bumblebee, run. Hearing Peter's cry, Phil Coulson had quick eyesight and quick hands. He immediately took out the weapon from his waist, pointed it at the supercar in front of him, and said loudly, Wait a minute, don't move. Seeing that Phil Coulson had taken out his weapon, Bumblebee immediately started shapeshifting without thinking to ensure Peter's safety. Click! A burst of dense mechanical noises came, and it took only a few seconds. Under Phil Coulson's eyes widened and a look of shock on his face, Bumblebee quickly transformed into a fighting form, its huge body firmly protecting Peter behind him, and turned his right hand. He made a giant hand cannon and pointed it in the direction of Phil Coulson. with a dazzling yellow light shining inside, making people shudder. What's this? Chapter 240, Part 1. Raising his head and looking at the 5-meter-tall behemoth in front of him, Phil Coulson felt his hands tremble slightly. He looked at the hand cannon in the opponent's hand, which was the same size as his whole body, and then looked at the weapon in his own hand. The size difference between the two was more than dozens of times. Such a huge amount of difference made Phil Coulson was even more doubtful whether his weapon could cause harm to him. Although he had just passed a specific instrument, Phil Coulson also detected that the supercar in front of him had special signals that were different from humans. He had already been mentally prepared for the identity of the other party, but after seeing the other party reveal his true identity, there was something about that. Under the shock of huge amounts of pressure, he now does not dare to act rashly at all. But if he were asked to give up resistance, Phil Coulson would be completely unable to do it. Just when the two sides were deadlocked in place, motionless, the next moment, behind Bumblebee, as the door opened, Chen Luo's figure slowly walked out. Everyone stop it. As Chen Luo's voice sounded, Phil Coulson stiffened, turned around slowly, and looked in Chen Luo's direction. When he saw Chen Luo's familiar face clearly, Phil Coulson was suddenly shocked and subconsciously exclaimed, "Mr. Chen Luo?" Phil Coulson, long time no see. Arriving in front of Phil Coulson, Chen Luo smiled and then said, "I think you are here for Bumblebee, right? If you are here to take him back, I'm afraid you will be disappointed." With that said, Chen Luo turned to look in the direction of Bumblebee and nodded slightly to him. Upon seeing this, Bumblebee silently put down his weapon, shook his body, and then transformed into a car form again. "I think you have also seen that Bumblebee is staying with me now. I think he will not cause any harm to humans. I think you should be very clear about this, right?" Hearing this, Phil Coulson felt a chill in his heart, nodded quickly, and said with a smile, "That's definitely. If you have Mr. Chen Luo to vouch for him, then there won't be any problem." After saying this, Phil Coulson showed a slight embarrassment on his face. He thought for a while and then said, "Just 3 days ago, a military base of the Eagle country in Afghanistan was suddenly attacked. Through the pictures sent back by the surviving Special Forces members, the big guys who attacked the base and Mr. Chen Luo behind you, the alien creatures, are very similar." "Is that so?" Chen Luo nodded slightly. A flash of realization flashed in his eyes, and said calmly, "That matter has nothing to do with Bumblebee. I definitely believe what Mr. Chen Luo said." Phil Coulson smiled and nodded at first, matching the sentence, but then changed the subject. "But I think Bumblebee should also know something about the alien creatures that attacked the base, so if you don't mind, can I help him understand the situation?" "If you just understand the situation, then definitely yes." Facing Phil Coulson's request, Chen Luo did not intend to refuse. Anyway, it was just a few questions and it would not have any impact on their next plan. In addition, Bumblebee would have to deal with them for a long time in the future. Living together, letting SHILD know something about the situation early can avoid unnecessary trouble in the future. After getting Chen Luo's consent, Phil Coulson's face lit up, and after thanking Chen Luo, he hurriedly came to Bumblebee and started communicating with him. After playing the relevant images in front of Bumblebee, Bumblebee reacted immediately the next moment. Dizziness. Decepticon. Listening to the sound coming from the speakers in the car, Phil Coulson couldn't help but have a trace of doubt on his face. "Bumblebee can't speak normally now, let me explain it to you." Just when Phil Coulson was about to continue asking, Chen Luo's voice suddenly sounded from behind. Upon hearing this, Phil Coulson perked up, quickly focused his attention, and listened carefully. Apart from him, although Peter in the carriage said nothing, he also tilted his ears and his face was also full of curiosity. Although he noticed this, Chen Luo ignored him. After all, he was Spider-Man from the future. Chen Luo believed that he could still bear this news, so he did not hesitate to tell it immediately. "If I understand correctly, Dizzy should be the name of the big guy who attacked the base. He is different from the Autobots on Bumblebee's side. Dizzy should be a member of the Decepticon faction. He is extremely aggressive, and there is no possibility of peaceful coexistence on the human side." Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo briefly told each other about the situation of the Autobots and Decepticons. As Chen Luo told the story, Phil Coulson's face became more serious, especially when he heard Chen Luo say after receiving relevant information about Megatron. Phil Coulson seemed to suddenly think of something, and his eyes flashed for a moment. Although he calmed down quickly, the strangeness of the other party was instantly caught by Chen Luo. A light flashed in his eyes, and he suddenly had some guesses in his heart. "Please give me flowers. That's about all I know about the situation. I'm afraid the rest is up to you." Although he was aware of the other party's movements, Chen Luo's expression was very calm and did not show anything strange. This made Phil Coulson, who was a little nervous, relax slightly. "That's enough." Phil Coulson looked at Chen Luo sincerely and thanked. "If it hadn't been for Mr. Chen Luo who told us this information this time, I'm afraid we still don't know who the enemy is. Now that we have a clear goal, what's next? It will be much easier to deal with it." After thanking Chen Luo again and again, Phil Coulson had no intention of staying here anymore. After saying hello, he planned to leave. But the moment he turned around, Chen Luo seemed to remember something and suddenly spoke. Wait a moment. Hearing this, Phil Coulson stopped in his tracks. Mr. Chen Luo, do you have anything else to do? It's nothing. Chen Luo smiled and then asked, I just want to ask, how did you find this place? Definitely yes. Phil Coulson answered very readily. Actually, this is a coincidence. 2 days ago, the Ministry of Defense base was suddenly invaded by an unknown hacker. Although it was handled in a timely manner, it still allowed the other party to get the information they wanted. After investigation, we found that the information the other party was looking for seemed to be related to a man named Sam Witwicky. Students, so we came to investigate. After learning more about it, we discovered that Sam once auctioned his grandfather's glasses to Peter, so we followed this clue and found this place. I see. After listening to the other party's explanation, Chen Luo nodded slightly, then smiled and said, Okay, I don't have any problems anymore. Seeing this, Phil Coulson was relieved and did not dare to stay too long, then quickly turned around and left. This time, Chen Luo did not speak to stop him, but quietly watched the other party drive away. After a while, he slowly turned around and walked home. On the other side, just as Phil Coulson drove away, his movements did not stop at all, and he immediately made contact with Fury. Not daring to neglect, he quickly told the other party all the news he had received. After hearing the news from Phil Coulson, Fury's face was filled with surprise. Chapter 241, Part 1. What did you say? Chen Luo is still alive? SHILD headquarters. After receiving the news from Phil Coulson, Fury's eyes subconsciously shrank and he asked in a deep voice. And when he finally confirmed the news, Fury was shocked. During the battle with Apocalypse, although the specific details were not disclosed to Scott and others after they came back, as the world's largest agent organization S.H.I.E.L.D., the information it possesses is definitely far beyond ordinary people's imagination. Therefore, after tracing for a long time, Fury was surprised to find that among the group of people who set out to fight Apocalypse, Chen Luo, who was the main force in the battle, quietly disappeared, and he lost track of Apocalypse together. After realizing this, Fury immediately reacted and had a vague suspicion in his heart. When he thought about it, with Apocalypse's strength, it was impossible to successfully defeat the opponent, even a king-level existence like Chi Sanchi Chen Luo, without paying some price. Combined with the information about Chen Luo's disappearance now, then the result of both parties perishing together is very likely to happen. In order to confirm his guess, Fury specially sent people to squat near Chen Luo's headquarters. After monitoring for nearly a year, Fury finally confirmed that Chen Luo was probably dead. To be honest, in addition to feeling regretful about Chen Luo's death, he also felt a lot more relaxed. After all, Chen Luo's race is there. As a member of the vampire, he also has the strength to rival Apocalypse. Such an existence, even if the other party has not posed any threat to humans so far, it is undeniable that as long as the other party exists for one day, it is a hidden danger to human beings. If the other party one day has the same thoughts as Apocalypse and wants to rule the world, then with Chen Luo's strength, Fury will never be able to fight against him. What's more, he also knows the habits of the vampire family very well. It is no exaggeration to say that it is a race that feeds on humans. If the world is allowed to be ruled by vampires, the fate of humans can be imagined. Because of this, Fury even came up with a plan to wipe out vampires around the world. If it hadn't been for him later when he discovered that most vampires in the world had stopped attacking humans for some reason, and there was also Dracula, a king in this world. Shocked by his fighting power, he finally gave up his plan to deal with the vampire clan. Thinking about it now, Fury couldn't help but feel lucky for his original decision. If he really did that, with Chen Luo returning now, after learning what he had done, it would be impossible for them to coexist peacefully as they do now. Thinking that Chen Luo could actually fight against a being like Apocalypse and even win in the end. With such strength, once he started a war with them, even with SHILD's many years of experience, he had no confidence that he could resist it. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. But before he could relax for long, Phil Coulson's voice came again. Director Nick Fury, you should have heard just now that the alien creature that attacked the base was a member of the Decepticons, and it is said that the leader of the Decepticons, Megatron, arrived on Earth early. You said, that big guy we found. Could he be? Hearing this, Fury perked up instantly, frowned subconsciously, and his face suddenly became serious. After thinking quickly in his mind for a moment, Fury nodded slowly and said, It's very possible. Judging from the time of our discovery, that big guy is probably the leader of the Decepticons. Speaking of this, Fury seemed to suddenly remember something and quickly asked, By the way, you probably didn't tell Chen Luo about the news about Megatron, right? No. Phil Coulson's voice came. After getting the news from Mr. Chen Luo, I left immediately. I think Mr. Chen Luo should not know that a Megatron is in our midst now. That's good. Fury breathed a sigh of relief, and then continued, Then you should come back quickly. Since Megatron is with us now, We may be able to use him to attract those from the Decepticon side. If someone comes here, it will save us the trouble of searching everywhere. Yes, I understand. On the other end of the phone, Phil Coulson nodded slightly and was about to hang up the phone when the voice of Bumblebee suddenly flashed in his mind and he subconsciously asked, "By the way, Director, what should we do about Mr. Chen Luo's place? Do we no longer have to deal with the alien creature there?" As his words fell, Fury fell into a long silence on the other end of the phone. After a while, finally, a gentle sigh came. "There's no need to worry about that. Since Chen Luo is there, the alien creature won't be able to cause any trouble. We just need to concentrate on dealing with the Decepticon affairs." "I see." Phil Coulson nodded, not surprised by Fury's decision, and hung up the phone without saying anything more. Now that things here have been dealt with, there is no reason for Phil Coulson to stay here. Now that SHIELD has begun to plan to deal with the Decepticons, it is time for him to return to provide support. So Phil Coulson stopped hesitation and immediately drove towards the headquarters. However, as he was leaving, Phil Coulson did not notice at all that the conversation he had just had with Fury all fell into the confusion that was hiding under his car at the moment. To be honest, the reason why Fan Lu was hiding here in the first place was to get close to Chen Luo. Just now, Phil Coulson happened to come to the door. In order to better hide himself, Fan Lu took advantage of the situation and hid here. The reason why he didn't choose to come out when Phil Coulson left just now was because Chen Luo was still standing outside the door at that time. Next to such a suspected super powerful man, Luan didn't dare to be careless at all, for fear of being killed by his own actions. Get the other person's attention. So at that moment, he had already made up his mind. After a while, he would find an opportunity to leave here and head to his destination. However, before he could make any move, by chance, he heard Phil Coulson's words in the carriage. When Luan heard that the other party knew Megatron's whereabouts, he immediately sent a message to Starscream. Before he could wait long, Starscream's order came. The content is also very simple, that is, let him temporarily give up tracking Chen Luo, and he will leave it to others to handle it. As for confusion, he has a new task. That is to let him follow Phil Coulson. As long as he can find the whereabouts of Megatron, he will send the location as soon as possible. At that time, he will send people to support. After receiving the order, Milan immediately changed his plan and carefully hid under the car, planning to use this ride to successfully find Megatron's location. And for all this, Phil Coulson also knows nothing. Chapter 242, Part 1. The Other Side. Not long after seeing off Phil Coulson, May finally came home from get off work. When she returned to the door, a look of surprise suddenly appeared on her face when she looked at the luxury supercar sitting on the lawn. However, this was just the beginning. When she saw clearly Peter, who was in the car at the moment, looking like he was talking to himself and didn't know what he was talking about, May was even more surprised. He hurriedly walked forward and knocked on the car window. After hearing the knocking sound, Peter turned his head subconsciously. When he saw the figure outside the car window, Peter's face lit up. He quickly rolled down the window and said, "Aunt May, you are finally back?" May nodded slightly and looked inside the carriage, her eyes full of doubts. "Peter, what's going on with this car? Are there guests at home?" Hearing this, Peter was stunned for a moment, then reacted instantly, shook his head and said, "No, Aunt May, you should have seen this car yesterday. It's the one Chen bought from the second-hand market." "You kid, what are you talking about?" May's face was full of disbelief, and she said, "It's not like I haven't seen the car that Chen drove back yesterday. It's only been one day. How could it have changed so much? Big?" "It's true." Peter rolled his eyes and immediately had an idea. "Actually, Aunt May, you don't know that Chen sent the car out yesterday to have it repainted. It's not considered sincere until today. Maybe it's because the repairman Chen hired is very skilled. That's why the car looks like new now." "Is that so?" Seeing that she still didn't believe it, Peter then said, "Everything I said is true. If you don't believe it, Aunt May, you can ask Chen." Having said this, Peter quickly opened the car door, got out of the car, and pushed May towards home while saying, "It just so happens that Aunt May is back now. We have been waiting for you for a long time. Let's have dinner first. I'm going to starve to death." After hearing this, May temporarily put aside her doubts and returned home with Peter. Later, during the meal, the three of them had communicated with Peter in advance. Faced with May's doubts, Chen Luo also covered it up calmly. After hearing his explanation, May felt relieved. After dinner, while May walked into the kitchen to wash the dishes, Chen Luo was also taken to his room by Peter, who wanted to see him. Closing the door quietly, now only Chen Luo and Peter were left in the room. Peter turned around slowly and looked at Chen Luo with a complicated look in his eyes. He opened his mouth several times, wanting to say something, but he couldn't. No words can come out. Seeing this, Chen Luo chuckled, stood up and came to Peter, stretched out his hand to rub his head, and said softly, "Silly boy, just ask whatever you want. Your Uncle Chen will never lie to you." Hearing this familiar voice coming from his ears, Peter felt slightly relieved, and his expression suddenly softened a bit. He lowered his head and thought for a while. Finally, Peter seemed to have thought of something. He slowly raised his head and looked directly at Chen Luo, with a trace of confusion in his eyes as he said, "Chen, who are you?" After seeing the scene just now, with Peter's intelligence, he definitely noticed that Chen Luo's identity was unusual. Thinking back to the scene when they met Chen Luo, Peter suddenly became more sure of his guess. The reason why there was some hesitation just now was because Peter had some worries in his heart. He was worried that once Chen Luo's identity was revealed, would he be able to stay in this family like he is now? Although he only spent less than 2 months with Chen Luo, in fact, in Peter's heart, he already regarded Chen Luo as a real family member. It was precisely because of Chen Luo's company that Peter, who had lacked father's love since childhood, Peter felt unprecedented warmth. Even though he calls Chen Luo by his first name all day long, in fact, his feelings for Chen Luo are even equal to those of Aunt May, who has taken care of him for more than 10 years. It is no exaggeration to say that Chen Luo is now in his mind. He has already distinguished himself from the role of father. It is precisely because of such deep feelings that after realizing the extraordinary identity of Chen Luo, Peter couldn't help but feel a strong sense of worry and fear in his heart. Staring tightly in the direction of Chen Luo, Peter's heart also lifted, and his muscles tensed up, quietly waiting for Chen Luo's answer. Facing his question, Chen Luo smiled slightly, his tone indescribably calm. "Silly boy, you guessed it right. I am indeed a little different from ordinary people, but I may have to say sorry to you. I can't tell you my identity yet. Just wait a few years. After you graduate from high school, you will know everything." After gently patting the other party's shoulder, Chen Luo's expression gradually became serious. "Peter, there are some things that you can't touch at your current age. You still need a certain amount of time to grow, so now, you just need to study hard with peace of mind. Do you understand?" Facing Chen Luo's dark eyes, Peter was silent for a moment, and then asked with a trembling tone, "Then, Chen, you will stay here in the future, right?" "Silly boy." Chen Luo was stunned at first, then quickly realized it, shook his head with a smile, patted the back of his head, and said softly, "That's for sure. No matter who I am 113, or I have a different identity, one thing is certain, that is, you will always be my family. Don't worry, kid. I still have to watch you grow up, get married and have children. How could I leave you?" As soon as Chen Luo said these words, Peter's heart suddenly dropped, his whole body relaxed instantly, and a heartfelt smile subconsciously appeared on his face. After learning that Chen Luo would not leave him or leave this home, Peter's heart was immediately filled with joy. Looking at Chen Luo in front of him, Peter was so excited that he immediately stepped forward and hugged Chen tightly. "Luo." Chen Luo was suddenly startled by this action and lowered his head. Gradually, a soft smile appeared on his face. Without saying anything, he patted his head gently. Feeling the warmth of Chen Luo's arms, this was a feeling that Peter had never experienced in so many years. He opened his mouth several times to say something, but just as the words came to his mouth, he stopped again. Chen Luo was not aware of his actions at all. After Peter's mood stabilized, Chen Luo slowly released his hands, told him to take a good rest, then turned around, opened the door and left. "Good night, Peter." Looking at Chen Luo's disappearing figure, Peter softly said after the door was closed again, "Good night, father." Chapter 243, Part 1. The next morning, after Peter and May went out one after another, Chen Luo didn't stay too long. He took out the pair of glasses Peter brought back from the room, then opened the door and came to Bumblebee, who had been waiting on the lawn outside the door all night. After sitting in the car, with the roar of the engine, Bumblebee took Chen Luo and drove towards the destination. A few hours later, in a forest outside, after several hours of traveling, the Bumblebee finally slowly stopped moving. The car door opened, and Chen Luo had just stepped out of the car. Immediately afterwards, there was a rumble and dense metal collisions in the surrounding dense forest. He didn't let him wait long. The next moment, a large shadow suddenly appeared in the dense forest ahead. Looking in the direction of the shadow, he didn't know when. Optimus Prime's tall figure slowly pushed through the forest ahead and came to in front of him. "List." Raising his head and looking at the big guy in front of him, Chen Luo took out his glasses without talking nonsense and threw them towards him. "I brought the stuff. Do you think it's still here?" Taking the glasses thrown by Chen Luo, Optimus Prime's blue electronic eyes instantly emitted a ray of light and began to scan. After scanning for a moment, Optimus Prime stopped and nodded slowly, with a hint of joy in his voice. "That's right. That's it. With it, we can find the whereabouts of the source of fire." After hearing this, before Chen Luo could react, a group of Autobots who emerged from the dense forest around him began to cheer. "Great. Then what are we waiting for? Let's set out quickly to search. Don't let the Decepticon brats get the better of you." Tiepi kept shaking the weapon in his hand, and the few strands of beard made of steel on his chin kept swaying in the wind. His tone was excited, and he looked restless. RC on the side also nodded repeatedly, looked in the direction of Optimus Prime, and said, "Optimus Prime, we'd better act quickly. The Decepticons have many more members on Earth than us. What will happen if they are discovered by the other party? It's abnormal. I'm afraid it will start a fight with us. Optimus Prime nodded. You are right. We should indeed act sooner. Through the scan just now, I already have clues about the whereabouts of the source of the fire. Next, we will head to Nevada. With that said, Optimus Prime lowered his head and looked at Chen Luo. Chen, what do you mean? I have no objection. Chen Luo shook his head and replied with a smile on his face. Seeing this, Optimus Prime was not in hesitation, so he immediately waved to everyone and said loudly, then let's move towards our destination at full speed. Autobot, TNFA. Afterwards, Optimus Prime and his party changed their forms again, and Chen Luo also sat back in the carriage again, following the people in front and driving towards their destination. While Chen Luo and his party were taking action, Nevada was on the other side. Bottom of Hoover Dam. What the world doesn't know is that underneath this world-famous dam, there is an extremely huge underground base hidden. This base had been established decades ago, not long after SHILD was founded. In order to hide the huge secrets found in the North Pole, SHILD directly approached the then president. Under the leadership of the president, this is how the dam was built. The reason why it is necessary to spend such huge amounts of money to build the dam is to successfully conceal the secrets below the dam. Once the secrets here are known to the outside world, it is conceivable that the whole world will also usher in a huge disaster. Amounts of sensation. After all, the secrets here are related to the existence of alien creatures, so Fury cannot be cautious, especially since Chen Luo learned about the existence of the Decepticons. Through the transparent protective shield in front of him, Fury looked straight ahead, looking at the huge, lifeless figure in front of him that was wrapped in cold air. Even though he had seen it many times before, there was still a look in his eyes. Unable to conceal my amazement. What an incredible life. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Fury would never have believed that such mechanical life actually existed. Looking at the metal structure in front of him that was completely different from that of humans, Fury couldn't help but secretly sigh at the wonder of the creation of the universe. Even though the big guy in front of him is not making any movement yet, Fury knows very well in his heart that if it weren't for the constant cold air that froze the opponent and caused him to fall into a deep sleep, I'm afraid the opponent would have been successfully revived long ago. This kind of precedent has not happened before. On the way to transport the big guy in front of him back from the North Pole, because the temperature gradually warmed up, and they didn't have time to freeze it with cold air, it briefly woke up and was very sensitive to the surroundings. A massacre began. In the end, they also spent huge amounts of money to put him back to sleep. From then on, their alertness towards this big guy went up several levels again. Since transporting it back to this base, it has become even more. It is breathing cold air on its body day and night to prevent it from reviving again. Megatron, is this your name? Fury sighed slightly, his eyes shining. Maybe only you know how to use that thing. Thinking of another object that was also in the base at this moment, Fury also felt a sense of expectation for the next plan. Fury had already made some guesses about the connection between that thing and the mechanical life in front of him. But because Megatron's destructive power was so great, even if he had an idea in his mind, he did not dare to wake it up rashly and let it come into contact with that thing. Originally, he thought that the unknown purpose would continue to be sealed in this way in the future, but since he learned about the existence of the Decepticons, Fury suddenly became interested. When he thought about it, if he could take this opportunity to capture a Decepticon member who was not as powerful as Megatron and was still within their control, and then use him to study that thing, he might be able to borrow this research yielded something. So the moment he ended the call with Phil Coulson, Fury already had a plan in mind. He wants to use Megatron to set up a trap to attract those Decepticon members into the network. As long as he successfully catches a suitable target, he will have achieved his goal. With this idea, Fury plans to, after Phil Coulson comes back, he will hand over this task to him. After so many years of observation, Fury also has great trust in Phil Coulson's ability. Fury didn't have to wait long. Above the base, after a night, Phil Coulson finally arrived at his destination. Opening the car door, Phil Coulson got out of the car and walked toward a passage above the dam. After passing the guard, taking out his ID, and conducting a series of strict checks, Phil Coulson was finally released and disappeared into the rear passage. While Phil Coulson was heading towards the base, the chaos hidden under Phil Coulson's car finally took action. Taking advantage of his small size, the 8 spider-like limbs under his body moved quickly crawling along the dam body and downwards. When they reached the bottom of the dam, Fanfan followed a small passage and dived into the dam. And everyone knows nothing about all this. Chapter 244, Part 1. On Phil Coulson's side, he took the elevator to the base below the dam. Phil Coulson walked quickly forward. Within a few minutes, he successfully arrived at the door of Fury's room. Opening the door and coming to Fury, who had been waiting for a long time, Phil Coulson said with a breathtaking smile on his face, "Director Nick Fury, I'm back? Thanks a lot." Fury nodded, patted the other person's shoulder lightly, and just comforted him. Then, Fury changed the topic and his face became serious again. But it's not time to rest yet. I have another task for you next. Hearing this, the smile on Phil Coulson's face froze, and he suddenly became much more serious. He stood quietly, without saying a word, and began to listen carefully. Next, I hope you. Afterwards, Fury told the other party his plan, and after hearing Fury's plan, Phil Coulson nodded decisively without hesitation. I understand. Then leave this task to me. After hearing this, Fury nodded with satisfaction and then said, then I'll leave it to you. But you must be careful. Megatron can't revive him under any circumstances. Do you understand? Phil Coulson looked solemn and agreed immediately. Later, just as the two began to discuss the next plan to deal with the Decepticons, on the other side, after some secret sneaking, 713, Milwan finally succeeded in arriving at this underground base. What a coincidence was that when he just arrived at the base, he happened to come to the huge space where Megatron was stored. Through the ventilation duct at the top of the room, I looked at the huge figure in front of me that was covered in cold air and fell into silence. Above the confused head, the pair of electronic eyes flashing with red light swayed rapidly, looking extremely excited. Megatron fell into a deep sleep and must be rescued as soon as possible. As he spoke, Confusion kept walking, quietly crawling along the pipes towards the control room dedicated to controlling the refrigeration device. Not long after, when he successfully arrived at the pipe above the control room, Fanwan could clearly see through the hole in the roof. There were two staff members in the room at this moment, looking at him seriously. Screen Kai. Except for these two people, the door of this room is closed, and because the walls of the room are very thick, the sound insulation effect is also excellent. Even if something happens in the room, no one from the outside will notice. Seeing this, Confusion immediately stopped staying and took action immediately. His arm quietly stretched out, and after a while of transformation, his arm suddenly turned into a small firearm shining with cold metallic luster. Although it was small in size, it was enough to cause fatal damage to people, and its power was no less than that of ordinary firearms. Bang! Bang! 2 gunshots rang out without any surprise, and the 2 people in the room immediately fell to the ground, lifeless. Immediately afterwards, Fan quickly fell from the upper passage and came to the instrument where the 2 of them were. After a dazzling operation, the next moment, 10 electronic synthesis sounds suddenly sounded in the room. The freezing device has been released. As these words fell, in the room where Megatron was located, beside him, the pipe that was spewing cold air day and night slowly stopped running, and the cold air gradually began to subside. Seeing this scene, the staff nearby were a little stunned at first, and then quickly reacted. Their expressions instantly became extremely panicked. Damn it! The freezing device failed. Quick, run. This big guy is about to wake up. Everyone, put down what you are doing and get out of here. In the room where Fury was, the 2 of them were awakened by the panic and exclamations, and subconsciously turned their heads to look out the window. However, when they saw the scene in front of them, Fury's pupils shrank violently and his expression changed drastically. Mom, F***K. What's going on? Director Nick Fury, look, the freezing device seems to have failed. I'm afraid Megatron is about to wake up. At this time, Phil Coulson on the side seemed to notice something and quickly pointed ahead in the direction of Megatron, his face becoming anxious. What did you say? Looking in the direction pointed by the other party, I saw that directly in front of the 2 of them, because of the loss of the cold influence caused by the freezing device, the layer of frost on Megatron's body was beginning to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye and gradually recovered his original color. The sleeping consciousness began to gradually wake up. In the huge and ferocious head, a pair of shining red eyes slowly opened and looked at the panicked crowd below. The next moment, a roar of huge amounts suddenly sounded. I'm Megatron. As he spoke, Megatron suddenly stretched out 2 huge amounts of sharp blades with both hands and launched an attack on the humans in front of him mercilessly. Under his terrifying destructive power, in less than a few seconds, the room where he was originally detained suddenly turned into a sea of fire. There were hundreds of staff members who had no time to escape. Facing such a terrifying existence as Megatron, they had no room for defense. They were filled with panic and were instantly swallowed up by the sea of fire that spread around them. In the room, Fury and the 2 watched helplessly as Megatron wreaked havoc in front of them, and they wanted to step forward to stop him, but they knew that with their strength, they would not be able to match each other even if they tried their best. You must know that this base was originally built for research purposes, so there are no huge amounts of powerful weapons left here. With the current military strength of the base, it may be difficult to compete with it. Under the current situation, there is no doubt that the plan he originally thought of can no longer be realized. With Megatron's awakening, not to mention using it as bait to attract Decepticon members, Megatron alone has already it's difficult to deal with. If there are other people involved, then even their escape will be a luxury. Thinking of this, Fury suddenly became a little anxious. Get out. Phil Coulson, let's get out of here. Director, what should Megatron do? There is no other way. Fury's face became calm again. I plan to activate the self-destruction program of this base before leaving. In short, no matter what, Megatron cannot be allowed to successfully escape. Upon hearing this, Phil Coulson's expression changed, and he was about to say something when a piercing alarm suddenly sounded from the room. Director, it's bad. According to the detection, there are more than 10 unknown objects from the outside coming towards the base. *T. What is that? Decepticons, attack. Bang bang bang. Countless artillery fire exchanges were heard. Listening to the intensive noise coming from the outside world, Fury's face turned dark and his heart sank suddenly. Chapter 245, Part 1. He was really afraid of everything. Just now, he was worried about the arrival of the Decepticons, but he didn't expect that the next moment they would actually find this place. Listening to the fierce firefights in his ears, Fury's heart began to sink. Damn, how did they find this place? Fury immediately cursed angrily. But now, no matter how angry he is, it will be of no use. Now that the Decepticons have come here, their purpose is self-evident, and they must be here for their leader, Megatron. Once the two sides begin to converge, the scene they will face next will undoubtedly be more severe. As soon as he thought of this, Fury immediately turned to look at Phil Coulson beside him and said, "Let's go quickly. This place must be detonated immediately. No matter what, Megatron and other Decepticon members cannot be allowed to join together." Phil Coulson also understood the seriousness of the matter and immediately turned around without saying anything more and ran towards the outside of the base with Fury. Because of the position of the two of them, their actions were not noticed by Megatron, who was wreaking havoc. Looking at the sea of fire below, Megatron's eyes flashed with a cold and cruel luster. When he briefly recovered his consciousness, he already knew that after he fell into a deep sleep, it was these humans who brought him here for research. To be treated like this by such a weak creature was nothing short of strange and shameful for Megatron. Big humiliation. Therefore, as soon as he regained consciousness, he immediately raised the butcher knife and started ruthlessly slaughtering the humans in front of him. Under his terrifying destructive power, everyone in the base, except Fury, had no chance of escaping. Before they could even get to the elevator door, Megatron was chasing after him. Kill it to pieces with one shot. In just a few minutes, the entire base suddenly turned into a sea of fire, and countless people were slowly swallowed by the fire amidst the mournful wailing. Just as Megatron was destroying the base, on the other side, on the outer edge of the base, on the huge body of the dam, Fan Luan emerged from the passage again without knowing when, looking up at the sky, shaking his head, and making some rapid sounds. Starscream, Starscream. Just now, after Melee released the freezing device that caused Megatron to fall into sleep, he immediately returned to the outside of the dam and then passed the coordinate information here to other Decepticons. After receiving the information from Confusion, Starscream, who was already ready to go, immediately gave the order and rushed towards the dam. In order to arrive as quickly as possible, Starscream did not bother to summon all the Decepticon members, but just let the members closest to here take the lead. Then, due to the advantage of flight speed, it only took less than a few minutes for Starscream, who transformed into a raptor fighter, to be the first to arrive at his destination. When he first arrived at his destination, the armed forces on the ground responsible for guarding thought they were friendly forces, so they didn't pay much attention. But what they didn't expect was that at the next moment, the Raptor fighter plane that was considered their friendly force immediately launched an attack on them. Relying on powerful firepower that was several levels beyond the human army, under the energy cannon suddenly fired by Starscream. Everyone below even had time to react, and they were instantly hit hard. In just one encounter, dozens of people died under Starscream's sudden attack, and this already accounted for about 1/5 of the force. After receiving this sudden attack, everyone finally came to their senses and quickly started to dodge. Taking advantage of everyone's dodge, Starscream also landed on the ground smoothly. The body began to change instantly, and finally transformed into a tall robot form about 7 or 8 meters tall. Standing at the passage leading to the underground base, his hands transformed into 2 giant hand cannons, and began to destroy the surrounding buildings unscrupulously. While launching the attack, Starscream's deep and hoarse voice sounded, "Decepticons, attack!" As his words fell, an armed helicopter roared past from the distant sky, then poured firepower onto the ground. Vertigo received. And that's not all. At the same time, at the end of the road not far away, a giant tank and a missile trailer, accompanied by the roar of 2 huge amounts of engines, were heading towards the base at extremely fast speeds. Noisy received. Attack received. Immediately afterwards, accompanied by a sound of metal friction, the 2 behemoths began to change forms one after another, and finally transformed into 2 huge robot forms with red eyes. They raised the weapons in their hands and launched forward without any hesitation. Attack. Please give me flowers. In addition to these 4 Cybertronians, there are also many members of the Decepticon side who are still on the way because they are far away. After learning the news of Megatron's recovery from confusion, the Decepticons immediately became energetic. Even though there were only 4 of them near the base, they did not have any hesitation and immediately launched an attack on the place. Attack. At this moment, their thoughts are more consistent than ever before. Now that their leader has awakened, it is time for the world to fall under the rule of their Decepticons. As long as there is a leader like Megatron, there is no doubt that they can achieve this goal. Facing the fierce attack from Starscream, the human troops on the other side had an increasingly difficult time resisting. As time went by, they quickly began to fall into disadvantage. Zero, however, such a result is not unexpected. After all, there is a huge amount of gap between the two sides in terms of individual soldier quality and firepower. As a Cybertronian who is famous even in the entire universe, Starscream's weapons and equipment it is several eras ahead of the human race. If the weapons and equipment on the human side are still equivalent to the products of the Bronze Age, then the Starscream side has evolved to modern civilization, and the power gap between the two is tens or hundreds of times huge. In such a huge amount of under the disparity, the human side has become increasingly desperate. Watching the bullets fired from your side hit the opponent's body that was made entirely of metal, it no longer had any impact except creating some sparks on the surface of the opponent's body. As for the opponent, just a random energy cannon blast easily shattered the thick barrier in front of them, and then the remaining force was so heavy that it blasted the humans behind the barrier into powder before slowly dissipating. If they hadn't been equipped with some individual rocket launchers, and the power of this killer weapon could cause some damage to them, I'm afraid they would have been slaughtered by the opponent by now. But even so, facing the constant artillery attacks from Starscream and his group, the resistance of the human side is also rapidly weakening. If this continues, I am afraid that in less than 10 minutes, this place will be completely occupied. Thinking of this, everyone was suddenly enveloped in a deep despair. Chapter 246, Part 1. While they were struggling to block the attack of Starscream and his party, on the other side, in the underground base, the moment they stepped onto the elevator leading to the exit, Fury immediately came to the side of the elevator. He didn't know what was done, but then, on the wall in front of him, the outer layer of steel quickly faded away, revealing several rows of digital buttons placed inside. After skillfully inputting a series of numbers, the next moment, an electronic synthesis sound sounded instantly. Ding! The self-destruction program has been started, and the countdown has begun. 60. 59. Hearing this voice, Fury finally breathed a sigh of relief. Phil Coulson on the side saw this and opened his mouth several times to say something, but in the end he chose silence with a complex expression. Noticing the other person's expression, 910, Fury also knew very well what his subordinate was thinking. He sighed softly, patted his shoulder, and said, "Phil Coulson, you should be very clear about the current situation. Just the two of us can no longer help others. Now, even if I don't choose to blow up this place, they can't escape Megatron's pursuit. In order not to let Megatron escapes from here, I have no other choice." "I understand, Director." Phil Coulson nodded, but still didn't say anything more. Seeing this, Fury also knew that he needed to be given some time to digest, so he stopped talking and started waiting silently. However, just as the two of them took the elevator towards the exit of the passage, Megatron, who was wreaking havoc in the base, also heard the countdown numbers ringing throughout the base at this moment. When he knew that the base was about to self-destruct, he saw that not only did he not without the slightest panic, he sneered disdainfully and said, "What a weak human being. Do you think you can hurt me with this method?" As soon as he finished speaking, the next moment, an electromagnetic pulse that was completely imperceptible to the naked eye suddenly began to spread outward from his body, covering the entire base in less than a second. Under the influence of the electromagnetic pulse, all the electronic instruments in this base instantly lost their effectiveness, the originally bright lights dimmed instantly, and the various equipment that operated day and night gradually fell silent. Definitely, the sound of electronic synthesis, which was counting down, immediately disappeared under the destruction of the electromagnetic pulse, and together with the self-destruction device it controlled, it completely lost its function. Not only that, even the elevator that Fury and the two were riding in now stopped in mid-air, and became motionless due to the loss of energy supply. Seeing the sudden disappearance of the elevator lights and the disappearance of the counting sound, Fury's expression in the elevator suddenly changed drastically, and his heart instantly sank to the bottom. "Director, what's going on?" In the darkness, Phil Coulson's doubtful voice came. "The energy supply to the elevator has been cut off." Fury replied with a very ugly face, "I think this should be Megatron's method. Damn it, it seems that the self-destruction device cannot operate properly. In addition to the elevator stopping, what is even worse is that due to the influence of electromagnetic pulse, The communication equipment carried by the two people has also lost its effectiveness, so it is undoubtedly impossible to seek help from the outside world. After realizing this, Fury was in a very bad mood, but fortunately his psychological quality was also extremely strong, so he quickly regained his composure. After thinking for a moment, Fury looked above his head and said decisively, "There is no other way now. There is only one way for us to get out of here, and that is to climb out along the cable above." After Fury's reminder, Phil Coulson quickly regained his composure and nodded immediately. The two people quickly reached an agreement, and then they used their weapons to quickly open a large hole in the top of the elevator that could accommodate one person in and out. Then the two people climbed out along the hole very neatly. Looking up, Fury breathed a sigh of relief. "It seems that we are not far from the exit. We should be able to go out soon." Speaking of this, Fury seemed to remember something at this time, turned to look at Phil Coulson and asked, "By the way, Phil Coulson, I remember you should have Chen Luo's contact information, right?" Hearing this, Phil Coulson instantly understood the other party's consciousness, nodded quickly and said, "Director, do you mean to ask for help from Mr. Chen Luo after we get out?" Nodding helplessly, Fury sighed. "There is no other way now. If we want to stop these alien creatures from continuing to destroy, only Chen's power can do it if possible." Fury definitely didn't want to ask Chen Luo for help, but now things happened too suddenly. He didn't even have time to realize his previous plan, and he was approached by the Decepticons. Now not only this base, but even the manpower he arranged here is about to be destroyed, so he can't care much at the moment. Only by calming down the turmoil as quickly as possible can the losses be minimized. For this reason, as long as Chen Luo is willing to take action, it is not unacceptable even if he pays some price. Phil Coulson also understood what he meant. His eyes were full of solemnity, and he nodded. Without saying much, the two of them immediately started taking action. Now the distance to the exit was only about 10 meters, and Fury had the first-class physical fitness of Superman after being injected with serum, so it only took less than a minute for the two of them to successfully reach the entrance. After opening the door with difficulty, the two saw the four huge figures in front of them approaching. Fury's face suddenly became nervous again, and he quickly ordered Phil Coulson to get in touch with Chen Luo as soon as possible and send him away. To the side, Fury immediately stepped forward and, together with the others, launched a sniper attack on Starscream and his party. After carefully arriving at a safe area and obtaining the communication equipment from the ground troops, Phil Coulson did not dare to neglect it all and immediately dialed the number exchanged from Chen Luo yesterday. Fortunately, within a few seconds, the other end of the phone was answered. When he heard the movement from the other side, Phil Coulson's face instantly brightened. "Hello. Is this Mr. Chen Luo 4.4? On the other side, hearing the voice coming from the phone, Chen Luo raised his eyebrows slightly and said with interest, "Phil Coulson? What do you want to see me for?" "That's it, Mr. Chen Luo." Knowing that the situation was urgent, Phil Coulson didn't waste any time and immediately told Chen Luo about the situation here. Then he said anxiously, "So there are several Decepticons here now. Members gathered together. We are no match for each other, and now only Mr. Chen Luo has the ability to help us. But Mr. Chen Luo, please rest assured. Director Nick Fury has just promised that as long as Mr. Chen Luo is willing to help, within the scope of our ability, we will unconditionally agree to your request." Hearing Phil Coulson's voice, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and he felt a little surprised. Chapter 247, Part 1. Chen Luo also never expected that he was still a little worried about Megatron's location, but he didn't want to worry about it for a long time, and now there was news. You must know that the prerequisite for the completion of his mission is to kill Megatron, the leader of the Decepticons, so even if Phil Coulson does not ask him for help this time, he cannot let go of this opportunity. And now if he rushes over and kills Megatron and his group, not only will he be able to get the reward that he has longed for, but he will also be able to get a favor from Fury. In Chen Luo's opinion, it's a good deal and couldn't be more cost-effective. According to Phil Coulson, they may not be able to hold on for a few minutes now, so if he is willing to help, he must move forward at full speed. Otherwise, if he is late, Megatron may be early. It's not necessarily a matter of leaving. After making a decision in his heart, Chen Luo immediately stopped hesitating and nodded immediately, saying, "I know. I helped you with this. Where is your location? 25 miles away. I'll leave now." Hearing Chen Luo's answer, Phil Coulson perked up and answered without thinking, "We are now." When he heard the location reported by the other party, Chen Luo's planned movement suddenly stopped. A light flashed in his eyes, and thoughts surged in his heart. "You said, where are you in Nevada now?" After confirming again, Chen Luo couldn't help but recall the position coordinates that Optimus Prime had obtained from the pair of glasses. There was some kind of suspicion in his heart. Chen Luo didn't say anything more, hung up the phone silently, and then said to the car, "Bumblebee, it seems I have to take the first step. There is something urgent that I need to deal with. You can tell Optimus Prime later, and you can just keep going. You don't have to wait for me. If my guess is correct, I'm afraid it won't be long before we can meet up again." After saying this, Chen Luo had a thought in his mind and immediately activated his teleportation ability and disappeared into the car instantly. The moment Chen Luo just disappeared, the next moment, Bumblebee, who was speeding quietly on the road, suddenly began to change and quickly return to its original state. His movement immediately attracted the attention of others. Upon seeing this, Optimus Prime and his party slowly stopped their progress, also returned to their original form, and came around Bumblebee. Bumblebee, what's wrong? What happened? Phantom, who had always had a good relationship with Bumblebee, was the first to ask. Optimus Prime was about to ask, but at this moment, he seemed to notice something. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes, and he asked, "Where's Chen? Why isn't he here now?" After his reminder, others finally noticed that Chen Luo had disappeared at some point, and all looked at Bumblebee with searching eyes. Faced with everyone's doubts, intermittent sounds came from the speakers on Bumblebee. Chen, Nevada, Rescue, Convergence. Although the meaning was a bit vague, Optimus Prime quickly understood what he meant, and he suddenly understood in his heart. "You mean, Chen, you left beforehand and we will meet up in Nevada later, right?" Bumblebee nodded immediately. After confirming his guess, Optimus Prime no longer had any doubts in his heart. When he was about to say something, Ironhide on the side suddenly asked with some doubts, "Bumblebee, are you serious? We were together all the time just now, but I never saw Chen Luo leave. In this case, how did he disappear?" These words immediately aroused everyone's curiosity. Faced with everyone's gaze, Bumblebee was silent for a while, and then such a word came from the speaker. "Teleport, teleport." As soon as these words came out, the whole place suddenly fell into silence. "Teleport? Are you sure?" After repeatedly confirming with Bumblebee, everyone's hearts, including Optimus Prime's, were suddenly shaken. As a well-known race in the universe, they naturally understand the horror of space ability. To give the simplest example, the reason why the Cybertronians were able to make a name for themselves in the universe was largely due to the space technology they possessed. If it hadn't been for the fact that the only natural enemy capable of producing space technology disappeared for no reason due to an accident, coupled with the constant internal fighting between the Autobots and Decepticons, they wouldn't have declined in such a short period of time. If, as Bumblebee said, Chen Luo possesses space ability, then there is no doubt that his strength is not as simple as shown before. If your guess is correct, Chen Luo's strength is probably at the top level among all the extraordinary level experts. After thinking of this, even Tiepi, who had always been a little dissatisfied with Chen Luo, was speechless at this time, and he couldn't help but feel a bit of awe for Chen Luo. After a moment of silence, Optimus Prime finally spoke. "Okay, since Chandu has said so, let's continue setting off." Everyone nodded, said no more, changed their forms again, and started on the road again. Deep in the dam, inside the underground base, after a lot of destruction, as several ferocious energy cannons were blasted forward, the wall on the side of Megatron instantly collapsed. 617 was no longer blocked by the wall. In the room on the other side, it was originally silent. The huge object that had been around for decades seemed to sense something and reacted instantly. In the center of this room, a cube with the size of tens of meters, covered with some special symbols, and with a layer of black metallic luster on the surface, stood quietly, as if it had fallen into a deep sleep. And this cube is the object that Fury has been thinking about, and wants to understand its use. It is also the treasure that belongs to the planet Cybertron and the source of fire that Megatron and Optimus Prime have been searching for decades. Until now, under some inexplicable induction, the fire source that had been silent for a long time finally reacted, and a blue light suddenly appeared on its surface, like some kind of substantial liquid, swimming freely on the body. Under the illumination of this light, the room that was originally in darkness was instantly illuminated, attracting the attention of countless people in an instant. Although this bright light lasted for less than a few seconds and then went silent again, by coincidence, the movement here just caught Megatron's attention. He felt an inexplicable move in his heart, and then he followed the broken wall directly, walked straight into the interior of this room. As soon as he came in, when he saw the huge and familiar source of fire in front of him, Megatron was stunned for a moment, and then a trace of ecstasy surged through his heart. This is the source of fire? Chapter 248, Part 1. Ignoring the tiny group of humans fleeing at his feet, Megatron strode toward the source of the fire. Looking up at the huge amounts of objects in front of him, he finally couldn't bear it anymore, stretched out his right hand, and pressed it directly forward. The moment it touched the surface of the fire source, the next moment, as if it recognized some kind of signal, the fire source began to change instantly. A layer of ripple-like lines appeared on the surface, and then, the fire source, which was originally about tens of meters long, began to gradually shrink, and finally stopped until it became only about 10 centimeters in diameter. Holding it in the palm of one hand, he lowered his head and looked at the small fire source in front of him. Feeling the energy contained in it, Megatron could no longer suppress the joy in his heart and laughed loudly. "I finally found it. The source of fire still belongs to me after all. Optimus Prime. It seems it's time for the war between us to come to an end. After a burst of laughter, Megatron's laughter finally slowed down. Looking at the panicked humans running away below, a cold and cruel luster flashed in his eyes, and he said coldly, "Then next, let me see the true power of the fire source." Having said that, he saw energy surging in his right hand. At the moment when the fire source was injected into his hand, the fire source was instantly activated, and a bright blue light quickly lit up on the surface. Then it quickly spread around. A blue light curtain instantly swept across the entire venue, covering all the mechanical products in the room. Then, less than a few seconds after the light curtain disappeared, the mechanical products shrouded in light quickly began to shake and tremble, and their entire appearance began to undergo drastic changes. Mechanical products as large as machine tools and cars, as well as small objects such as mobile phones and welding guns, were all shaking rapidly in place at this moment. Then, under the horrified gaze of the humans around them, accompanied by waves of familiar metal friction sounds, they all transformed into robot forms like Megatron. What is this? Damn, these things won't attack us, right? Looking at the figures slowly standing up all around, the faces of the pedestrians who were running away suddenly broke out in cold sweat. Their pupils began to shrink violently, and their bodies stood frozen in place, not daring to move. But unfortunately, their actions did not save them from their subsequent fate. After briefly becoming familiar with their own bodies, the group of new beings spawned by the power of the fire source turned their gazes to the crowd around them, their eyes shining with red light and looking unusually cold. The next moment, before people could react, these new Cybertronians took out their weapons one after another and launched attacks on the crowd without any hesitation. No, everyone run. Damn it, these alien bastards. Neezy will fight them. However, no matter how people reacted, under the overwhelming strength gap, in just a few minutes, except for a few lucky ones who escaped from the battlefield, everyone else died at the hands of these new life forms. Even after just awakening, these life forms already have strength beyond ordinary people. If divided according to the general level of the universe, even the weakest existence among them has already reached the surface level of strength. There are some stronger individuals among them, whose strength has even reached the elite level like Starscream. Even compared with Megatron, they are only a step behind. Seeing the performance of these new tribesmen, Megatron was very satisfied and nodded subconsciously, his heart full of joy. There is no doubt that after successfully mastering an artifact like the fire source, he will be able to go crazy without any restrictions and start creating more shape-shifting diamonds. He can even successfully create a huge army in a short period of time. Judging from the strength of his tribe, he only needs to produce about 1 million by then to conquer this planet and bring it under his rule. In addition, with the strength he currently possesses, even if he faces Optimus Prime's group of Autobots again, he can easily crush them. As long as he kills all those damn Autobots, there is no doubt that he will become the only king of Cybertron. At that time, as long as the old guy sleeping in the moon is found again, and then with the help of his space technology, the dying Cybertron star is transferred here, and finally the planet is completely swallowed up, then his home planet there will also be the possibility of new life. Thinking of this scene, Megatron could no longer hold back and laughed wildly. For the rebirth of Cybertron, I will decide on this planet. Looking down at the new tribesmen who were still destroying wildly, Megatron roared, "Go, my people, destroy everything here and declare to everyone on this planet who is the master of this planet." Dal. As soon as he finished speaking, the new shape-shifting kings around them roared subconsciously, their eyes flashed red, and they raised their weapons and started destroying the surroundings without any scruples. Under the action of hundreds of shape-shifting Vajras, violent artillery fire instantly covered the entire surrounding area. The thick walls began to rapidly crumble and decompose, and the entire base began to disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye. As the base was destroyed, the dam that had stood for decades above the base was also affected. With bursts of violent vibrations, the entire dam began to shake violently. The people fighting above the dam were shocked. What happened? Fury asked loudly. Phil Coulson on the side was moved and subconsciously looked towards the bottom of the dam. However, when he saw what happened, Phil Coulson's face turned pale and he yelled, "No, the dam is starting to collapse." What? Everyone's hearts were shaken, and their faces all became panicked. You must know that they are still fighting against Starscream and his group. With these 4 huge amounts of shape-shifting King Kong blocking the front, even if they want to leave here now, they are unable to do anything. Once the dam body collapses completely, they will have no possibility of escape and will inevitably fall downwards. At this moment, they are about 100 meters above the bottom of the dam body. If they fall from this height, their fate can be imagined. And no. So now the only chance to survive is to forcefully break through the obstruction of the 4 shape-shifting Vajras in front. Although the truth is like this, everyone can understand it. but now they are relying on the bunker to barely block the opponent's progress. If they get out of the bunker and directly charge, it is really the same as seeking death. I'm afraid before they can take even 2 steps, they will be instantly killed by the opponent's artillery fire. At this thought, everyone's faces suddenly showed a look of despair. Even Fury, who had always been calm, couldn't help but sweat profusely and his face looked very ugly. In the current situation, even if he can summon a strong man like Captain Marvel to come, it will still take a certain amount of time, and what he lacks now is precisely time. Unless the other party can teleport here after receiving the signal. Otherwise, even if he presses the distress button, I'm afraid it will be too late. Faced with such a desperate situation, Fury has no choice but to wait for death to approach step by step. Just when everyone looked desperate, the next moment, along with a wave of fluctuations in the air behind everyone, followed by the very familiar voice of Fury Phil Coulson. "Oh, it seems that I came at a good time." Hearing this voice, the two of them were stunned for a moment, and then they immediately reacted, and their hearts were filled with ecstasy. Chapter 249, Part 1. List. The two of them turned around, and when they saw Chen Luo suddenly appearing behind them, their faces were completely undisguised, and they shouted loudly. Chen Luo nodded slightly in response, and glanced around with his peripheral vision. As Phil Coulson said before, the situation looks very serious. Now there is a group of Decepticons blocking the road ahead, and it seems that the dam under their feet is also at risk of collapsing at any time. Once it completely collapses, and he does not arrive in time, I am afraid that the black braised egg in front of him will be here. Say goodbye to this world. But now that he has arrived in time, these people will definitely not be in any danger anymore. Looks like you guys, Director Nick Fury, need a little help now. Chen Luo lowered his head, smiled at Fury, and said playfully, "How's it going? Do you need my help to get you out? But let me explain in advance that saving you and killing these Decepticons are not the same thing. I think, Director, you need to pay something extra." "No problem." At this critical moment, Fury couldn't care less and immediately nodded and agreed. "This time I owe you an extra favor." "Readily." Chen Luo nodded with satisfaction. "Then I will 143 send you away first, and then I will deal with these big guys." Saying that, Chen Luo immediately asked these people to hold hands and watch each other for a long time. Although Fury was a little confused when he heard Chen Luo's request, he couldn't help but think about it in this situation and immediately ordered it to be done. Soon, when these people were connected to each other, Chen Luo did not hesitate and reached out to grab the shoulder of Fury in the front. Then with a thought, the teleportation ability was activated. The next moment, Chen Luo and the remaining nearly 100 people disappeared from the spot. Boom! The moment Chen Luo and others disappeared, several energy cannons blasted towards this side. Under the impact of the surging energy, the bunker in front that originally blocked the opponent's sight finally failed to hold up and collapsed immediately. Seeing this scene, Starscream and the others immediately planned to rush forward and kill all the bugs that dared to stop them. However, when they saw the scene behind the bunker, they stopped instantly. How is this going? Looking at the empty scene in front of him, Attack, who had always had a bad temper, suddenly let out bursts of manic roars and fired artillery fire wantonly from the weapons in his hands, destroying everything around him. Just when a few people were confused, the next moment, accompanied by a loud rumbling sound, the dam body under their feet quickly began to collapse at a faster rate, and countless gravels fell downwards. The originally smooth passage was also visible to the naked eye. Speed collapses. Damn, this building is going to collapse. Quickly retreat. After realizing this, Starscream immediately took action without thinking. He was stunned, and 2 blue energy flames were sprayed out from behind the two of them, supporting the two of them and gradually suspended in the sky. The two of them grabbed the other 2 companions who did not have flight ability, and then flew to the other side together. Not long after the 4 of them retreated to the outer area of the dam, they slowly landed. Looking at the dam that was rapidly cracking and decomposing in front of them, they all fell into silence for 10 seconds. "Starscream, have you seen where the leader is now?" Finally, the dizzy on the side couldn't help it anymore, turned to look at Starscream and asked. Hearing this, Starscream shook his head slowly. "The leader should still be down there now. But don't worry, with the leader's strength, he can leave at any time if he wants. Next, we just need to wait quietly here." After hearing this, he gradually became quiet. Thinking of the strength of their leader, they are also full of confidence at this moment. If he fell into a deep sleep like before, he might not be able to leave from there. But now that he has woken up, then, CGDG, this is just a dam. It's impossible to stop him. While the 4 of them were standing there waiting, suddenly, in front of them, there was a wave of fluctuation in the air, and then, Chen Luo's figure instantly appeared in front of them. Who? The moment they saw Chen Luo, several people were shocked and subconsciously became on guard. "Why? Don't you recognize me?" Looking at the 4 big guys in front of him with interest, A smile appeared on Chen Luo's face. You should also be members of the Decepticons, right? Looking at the marks that belonged to the Decepticons on several people, Chen Luo walked toward them step by step with a calm expression. I don't know how strong your strength is. Compared with the big guy I defeated before, what's the difference? As soon as these words came out, while the other three were still confused, Starscream, who was usually the most astute, suddenly felt a chill in his heart. His mind was spinning, and he reacted instantly. Are you the extraordinary strong man who killed the roadblock? Extraordinary? When Chen Luo heard this, his eyes suddenly became more interested. Is this your standard for classifying strength levels? Interesting. Although I want to know what's going on, I'm sorry, I have other things to deal with later, so now, I can only ask you to disappear. As soon as he finished speaking, the next moment, Chen Luo moved his feet, and then disappeared instantly. No, run away. Seeing this, Starscream shrank his eyes, shouted sharply, and then turned around and ran away without thinking. The moment after confirming Chen Luo's identity, Starscream suddenly lost the courage to fight. After all, he was not a novice who knew nothing, so he naturally understood how huge amounts of strength gap there was between the two. Not to mention him, even if the four of them together, plus Megatron who can successfully come out of the underground base, attack Chen Luo at the same time, they probably won't be the latter's opponent. Regarding this point, after Starscream's reminder, the other three people immediately reacted. With the huge amounts of strength gap, they didn't even have the thought of resisting, and turned around and ran away in a panic. However, with their speed, how could they be the opponent of Chen Luo, who had mastered the magical skill of teleportation? With a thought, he instantly crossed a distance of more than 10 meters and appeared behind Noisy. The palm of your hand turns into a knife, and you can swing it with one swing. Even though it is still daytime and there is no blessing from the dark favor ability, Chen Luo's power at this moment is still dozens of tons. With the blessing of such terrifying power, Chen Luo's palm seemed to turn into an indestructible terrifying blade, instantly cutting off the opponent's head and splitting it into two. Chapter 250, Part 1. The huge body that was just about to escape suddenly froze, and then, the noisy huge amounts of metal head fell downwards. The body swung unconsciously a few times, and then hit the ground heavily in front of it. The next moment, Chen Luo kept moving, and before the head fell to the ground, the teleportation started again. Almost at the same time, before the other three people could react, three figures of Chen Luo seemed to appear on the field at the same time. These three figures appeared behind the other three people, and their movements were uniform. It looked like there was something wrong. An inexplicable harmony. As the hand knife containing terrifying power was swung down, without any accident, the huge amounts of bodies of the three people froze, and then split into two in an instant, and the four huge amounts of metal heads fell to the ground, and their bodies all jumped. Falling to the ground, there is no sound. It was just a face-to-face meeting, and it took less than 3 seconds in total. Starscream and his party, who had caused heavy casualties to Fury and the others, were all slaughtered by Chen Luo. Looking at the four huge figures lying on the ground now, completely silent, Chen Luo turned around calmly and looked forward. Then it's your turn next. Just after rescuing Fury and his group, Chen Luo had already asked them about the location of Megatron at the moment. So after dealing with these miscellaneous soldiers, Chen Luo kept moving and immediately started the next step. Tear. The clothes behind him instantly shattered. Behind Chen Luo, two huge amounts of batwing opened up, and his wings flapped violently. Then, Chen Luo instantly rose into the sky, smashing the air in front of him, and headed straight towards the dam. Throw it down below. A terrifying sonic boom sounded in the sky, immediately attracting the attention of Fury and his group on the other side, and subconsciously they all looked up to the sky. Looking at the white air wave visible to the naked eye hanging in the sky at this moment, everyone's faces showed a hint of shock. In the state of bat transformation, Chen Luo's speed has reached about twice the speed of sound at this moment. Coupled with his own defense power that surpasses steel, Chen Luo is like a huge amount of cannonball, speeding towards the speed of lightning. The destination sped away. Boom! However, a few seconds later, Chen Luo rushed straight to the bottom of the dam, and then without losing speed, he crashed straight into the ground. With an unprecedented roar, Chen Luo instantly penetrated the ground below, including the thick dam body, which was dozens of meters thick, breaking through all layers of protection. In an instant, we arrived inside the base on the ground floor. Because the speed was too fast, Chen Luo had no time to brake and instantly hit the steel-paved ground at the bottom of the base. There was another loud noise, and after a big hole was made in the floor, Chen Luo finally stopped. Pushing aside the layer of steel ground surrounding him, he pushed his legs hard and pulled his feet out from the soil under the floor. The wings behind him disappeared again, returned to their normal form, and slowly walked out of the large hole step by step. What a hassle! Lowering his head and looking at the dirt on his body from breaking the ground, Chen Luo suddenly shook his head in distress, secretly feeling a little pity in his heart. If it weren't for the fact that he was bound to get the fire source this time, or else he really couldn't resist the temptation of the biological force field. If he had this ability, then he wouldn't be in such a mess now that he thought about it. Shaking his head and not thinking more, Chen Luo looked around. Although the base is already dark at the moment, for Chen Luo, who is a creature of the dark system, the environment here has no impact on him at all. Under his eyes, everything here is clearly visible. Nothing can stop him from moving forward. It is also worth mentioning that in such a dark environment, his ability to be favored by darkness was also activated. All attributes of his body were also improved, and his strength was nearly doubled again. He could feel the surge in his body at this moment. Chen Luo was also full of confidence in his strength. In his opinion, no matter how strong Megatron is, he cannot be his opponent. So as long as he can successfully find the opponent and then directly solve it, he will be able to get the rewards of the system. It was truly an easy and enjoyable mission. Chen Luo's eyes flickered, and he looked around as he moved forward, as if looking for something. The reason why he did this was, on the one hand, to look for traces of Megatron, and on the other hand, he also wanted to see if he could really find the whereabouts of the source of fire here. Ever since Phil Coulson heard that they were in the Nevada area, and then thinking about the coordinates provided by Optimus Prime, Chen Luo had a vague suspicion in his mind. If he remembered correctly, in the plot he saw, the source of fire ended up in the same base as Megatron. Now that Megatron's location has been found, is the source of fire also here? He needs to confirm it himself to know. Please give me flowers. If he could successfully find the whereabouts of the fire source this time, he would no longer have to accompany Optimus Prime and his party to continue searching. As long as Megatron was eliminated, he would officially have control of the fire source. With this artifact in hand, he will undoubtedly be more confident if he wants to fight Thanos in the future. With this thought, Chen Luo became more motivated. Walking quickly forward, most of the base has collapsed. Everything around it has been buried by rocks falling from above. Therefore, there is very little space for Chen Luo to move freely. As a last resort, he can only do it himself. In the face of his roughly doubled strength, the rocks blocking his progress were like weeds on the roadside. With just a casual punch, they were instantly blasted into powder. As the rocks in front of him disappeared, the originally crowded space instantly became empty, allowing for passage of roads. Cleaning up the road while walking, after more than 10 minutes of cleaning, finally, at the moment when Chen Luo smashed a huge boulder next to him, a sudden change occurred the next moment. Roar! A crazy roar sounded, and then, an energy cannon flashing with blue flames instantly rushed out from under the boulder and blasted straight in the direction of Chen Luo. Facing this attack, Chen Luo was instantly hit on the spot before he could dodge. But fortunately, after suffering a loss a few years ago, Chen Luo had already decided that no matter what kind of battle he faced in the future, he would not be careless, and the energy transformation obtained from Xiao would remain activated throughout the process. In case of any sudden attack, it is precisely because of this layer of protection that under this sudden sneak attack, even with the strength of this energy cannon, it can easily shatter his steel-like defense, but in the face of the ability to transform energy, there was still no surprise, and it was instantly absorbed by Chen Luo's body. With Chen Luo's current physical strength, it would be possible to break through his defense unless the total energy of this attack could exceed the yield of a nuclear bomb. But with the intensity of this attack now, it is obviously impossible to reach such a level. After absorbing this energy, Chen Luo's eyes were instantly attracted to the movement beside him, and he looked straight at the other person. Huh? This is Fan.